Chapter 2852. 2852. Complete Reversal of Events. Chapter 2852. 2852. Complete Reversal of Events. 2852. Complete Reversal of Events. There was treasure. Treasure was contained in one of the raw stones that Ling Han chose. This is too lucky, right? He actually guessed correctly for once. But could it compare to a great herb? It won't be much else but a piece of divine metal, right? Everyone was stunned for a moment and then shook their head. No matter what was revealed from the raw stone at this point, it would be useless. It was too late. That's not right. Someone was staring at that raw stone, and his expression gradually became serious. Even more people were exclaiming in succession. This looks like... It's impossible, right? Heavenly Venerable Seal. They hurriedly urged that stonecutter to continue cutting. Whatever they could see of the object now was still too blurred. When these words fell, Niu Buchuin and Lung Xuran could no longer sit by and became nervous. Though they had found 3 treasures, it was only that great herb that was really valuable. If Ling Han really found a Heavenly Venerable Seal, then even if it was 9th grade, its value would still crush the value of their findings. Fu Tianqing sighed in relief. This master was really too evil. He had definitely done this on purpose, leaving the best and the only raw stone that would contain treasure for last, causing him to worry needlessly for so long. Couldn't you have cut this open first? That stone cutter continued cutting. This time he was even more careful. It was extremely possible that there was a Heavenly Venerable Seal inside this, and if he made the slightest mistake, the consequences were not something that he could bear. Even if he worked for the rest of his lifetime, his next life, and the next life after that, it would still not be enough to compensate. Cut, cut, cut. Layers of stone were scraped off, and the inside of the raw stone was revealed further and further. It really is a Heavenly Venerable Seal. When a glimpse of primal chaos appeared, everyone was exclaiming. They could just vaguely see a blurred seal that was floating inside. That was definitely a Heavenly Venerable Seal, they could guarantee it. However, they could not tell what grade the seal was, or if it was a seal that they had already mastered. Ling Han, how about selling this seal to me? Someone immediately said. Just name your price. It should be known that the grade of the seal is still unknown for now. I am also taking a huge risk here. Sell it to me, and I will give you a great herb. Another person made a bid. He appeared much more sincere, yet others rolled their eyes at him. He wanted to trade just a great herb for a Heavenly Venerable Seal? Just who did he think he was? Ling Han waved a hand dismissively. I'm not selling. Even if he had already mastered the seal, he could still pass it on to the Empress, who knew his son or his daughter, right? He would never complain about having too many Heavenly Venerable Seals. Everyone sighed, but they were not too surprised. There really were not many people that would sell off Heavenly Venerable Seals. They all glanced sympathetically at Niu Buchuin and Lung Xuran. These 2 people should make good on their wager now. Niu Buchuin and Lung Xuran were both pale. Who would know that just when everything looked settled, such a great turn of events would happen? Fuck! Ling Han's luck was really too good, wasn't it? They definitely did not believe that Ling Han was versed in stone gambling. Otherwise, why hadn't he chosen a few more valuable raw stones? It could only be said that his luck was too good, and he just happened to guess correctly for the most valuable out of the lot. Ling Han smiled evenly. Now that you've lost, Kowtow. Niu Buchuin and Lung Xuran exchanged looks. They naturally did not wish to kneel and kowtow in public. Otherwise, how would they still have face to see other people in the future? Ling Han, I can help you in stone gambling for a year free of charge. How about it? Niu Buchuin spoke up first. He still very much valued his pride. When everyone heard this, they all couldn't help but give an "oh" in response. Niu Buchuin's abilities in stone gambling were clear to see. If they could have his help in stone gambling for a year free of charge, that would definitely be exceedingly profitable. Ling Han definitely had no reason to refuse. What is it? Do you want to die? Ling Han asked menacingly. He did not like killing needlessly, but the man had clearly lost, yet was reneging on his wager. In that case, he shouldn't blame Ling Han for being ruthless. Pa! Niu Buchuan involuntarily knelt. This glance from Ling Han was too terrifying. It should be known that he was only a ninth heaven celestial king. How could he possibly bear the pressure imposed by a fourth-tier one? Now that Niu Buchuan had knelt, he had lost the will to resist. Though he was reluctant and unwilling, a bet was a bet. If he reneged on his bet, he would be similarly shamed. Furthermore, Ling Han had just killed people, and was a bastard that would not listen to reason at all. This kind of person was really not to be trifled with. Pa, pa, pa. He began kowtowing 10 times in a row, not even missing once. He stood back up, his eyes spitting flames, feeling an urge to kill. Ling Han did not care at all, and looked towards Lang Xiuran. It's your turn. Lang Xiuran was defiant and made a futile attempt to struggle, declaring, My father is the 4th tier heavenly venerate Lung Dao. What Lung Dao? Kneel. Ling Han rebuked harshly. Otherwise, I will kill you right here and now. Lang Xiuran very much wanted to stay stubborn, but he did not have the slightest bit of confidence to do so. Indeed, if Lang Xiuran did not adhere to the rules, Ling Han would be completely within his right to kill the former. Even his father could not find anything wrong with that. At least, he could not use this as a reason to take vengeance on Ling Han. Furthermore, Ling Han was a man who was true to his word. Lang Xiuran did not dare to gamble that Ling Han would not have the determination to kill. He knelt slowly, his eyes filled with rage. He swore that he would definitely ask his father for help and have him kill Ling Han. Pa, pa, pa. Lang Xiuran, too, kowtowed 10 times. Ling Han smiled calmly and stretched out his hands, grabbing that heavenly venerable seal, which he then pressed into his mind. Very good. Though this was a 9th grade seal, it was not one that he was equipped with. Lang Xiuran and Niu Buchuan were whispering to each other, and they both looked towards Ling Han after a while. Ling Han, do you dare to accept another gamble? Niu Buchuan asked. Ling Han glanced at the two of them. Sure. This time we will go to the mid-grade area, Niu Buchuan said. He thought that he had lost because it was very hard to discover anything valuable in the low-grade area, and Ling Han had surpassed him by chance. But the mid-grade area would be different. The chance of treasure emerging there was higher, and its value would be higher as well. Niu Buchuan was going to win back what he had lost there. Okay. Ling Han did not mind. The winner can win all that the loser has obtained, Lang Xiuran continued. Ling Han nodded. All right. This was not unusual. In a fight, the winner would win everything, and it was the same for a lot of places. Additionally, Lang Xiuran's eyes became sharp. I want to have a life gamble with you. Life gamble. Ling Han laughed in spite of himself. Are you even worthy of that? Ling Han was a 2nd tier heavenly venerate whose battle prowess soared directly into the 4th tier. But Lang Xiuran was only a 1st tier heavenly venerate. What right did he have to bet on his life with Ling Han? Are you afraid? Lang Xiuran demanded proudly. Sure then. Ling Han nodded again. Since you no longer wish to live, then I will retrieve your dog's life on behalf of the heavens. D-Dog's life. Lang Xiuran almost went mad with fury. He was a noble and dignified heavenly venerate, whom even the heavens had to respect, and his life was actually called a dog's life. Master, the large black dog may bite you, Fu Tianqing warned from the sidelines. The large black dog was extremely black-hearted, and if he knew about this, he would definitely bear a grudge against Ling Han. This brat was not a good guy either. Lang Xiuran looked towards Fu Tianqing. feeling that the latter was mocking him. "Let's begin, then," Ling Han said. In any case, his victory was assured, and he did not mind even if it was Lung Dao's life on the line. They entered the mid-grade area. The raw stones here were far from as numerous, but the area occupied was instead even more expansive. One raw stone after another was displayed individually like antiques, and the lowest price for a single raw stone was 10 pieces of divine metal. Furthermore, there were some that were larger and looked better, and were priced as high as 100 pieces of divine metal. In fact, there were a few most valuable pieces that could not be bought with divine metal, but rather had to be bought with supremely valuable medicine or heavenly venerable seals. Chapter 2853. 2853 Betting with Life. Chapter 2853. 2853 Betting with Life. 2853 Betting with Life. Similarly, we have one day to choose, Niu Buchuan said. This time, he didn't have much pressure. Even if he lost, it would be Lung Xuran who had to pay with his life. So Niu Buchuan was calm and bore a composed demeanor, with a kind of detachment like an outsider. "All right," Ling Han said. There were about 3,000 raw stones here. With his current speed, a day's time was sufficient for him to sort through all of them. Having known that there was stone gambling in the mid-grade area, even the shopkeeper of the raw stone lane came. He was a white-haired old man. He appeared to be old and decrepit, but no one would dare to underestimate him, because this man was a fourth-tier heavenly venerate. The world has changed indeed. A dignified fourth tier was actually here as a shopkeeper. It wasn't that he had no aspirations, but rather that he was able to enjoy the benefits of his favorable position. If there was any treasure unearthed, he would get first priority in bidding. He was a fourth tier with the financial resources. In addition to some coercion, few people would dare not to give him face. He was given the title Great Clouds, and had been a cultivator for over a dozen epochs. Everyone was watching on the side. Perhaps they might learn a thing or two from the methods of Niu Buchuan. Great Cloud's heavenly venerate specially allowed Ling Han and Niu Buchuan to personally select their raw stones, respectively, and settle the final bill once everything ended. Niu Buchuan rushed out immediately. He was only at the 9th heaven. It was no problem for him to take out a few pieces of divine metal, but he was unable to take out a dozen or several dozen pieces, even if he wanted to. Therefore, only under the circumstances of having the support of an extremely wealthy backer would he be able to come here to select what he needed. There was no helping it, as he hadn't been a raw stone grandmaster for very long, and so he naturally didn't have significant savings. Ling Han didn't waste time, either. It couldn't be ruled out that Niu Buchuan's luck would be heaven-defying, with him picking 10 raw stones with the highest value. No matter how awesome Ling Han was, it would be impossible to overturn his defeat in that case. Both of them stopped talking and concentrated on looking for raw stones. Time passed quietly. One day's time was quite short indeed, and it was very soon time for the two sides to face each other with the outcome. Lung Xuran couldn't help becoming nervous. His life or death was about to be decided at this moment. Ling Han had looked through all the raw stones once, while it seemed that Niu Buchuan only looked through half of them. Although there were much fewer raw stones here, the quality of each piece was so good that the challenge of distinguishing one from the other became accordingly much more difficult. Ling Han smiled. Among the raw stones that Niu Buchuan hadn't looked through yet, at least 4 of them could be squeezed into the top 10. He didn't believe that Niu Buchuan's luck would be so good to the point of heaven-defying. Begin selection of the stones. Niu Buchuan stretched out his hand, and 10 raw stones flew towards him immediately with his grabbing motion. Ling Han made a move at the same time, and 10 raw stones similarly fell into his hands. The two respectively handed over the raw stones to the staff of the raw stone lane beside them, and cutting of the stones began immediately. The first piece was a scrap stone. Niu Buchuan couldn't help showing disappointment. He was full of confidence. With him making his move in the mid-grade area, it ought to be that each stone wouldn't have come to nothing. Unexpectedly, the first piece was a scrap stone. Fortunately, Ling Han also opened up a piece of scrap stone. Again, for the second pair, the two staff members were very careful. The probability of harvesting a treasure in the mid-grade area was very high, so they had to be extremely careful. "There's treasure!" someone immediately shouted after a few cuts by the blade. "There's also something here." Someone pointed at Ling Han's stone. After a few more cuts, everyone's eyes lit up immediately as a great herb was actually unveiled out of the raw stone selected by Niu Buchuan. On the other hand, Ling Han merely got a piece of divine metal. The gap was so wide that there was no comparison at all. However, everyone didn't start placing their bids, because it had yet to be known who would emerge victorious in the end. The victor would obtain everything. There was no telling to whom this great herb would belong. This great herb is cyan in color, and it is 1 grade higher than the previous one. You can't even exchange it for 1,000 pieces of gold. Although there was no bid, it was still necessary to evaluate the approximate grade of this great herb. The greater the age of this peerless great herb, the better grade it was. Going by the order of 7 colors from red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple, red was the oldest and purple the youngest. However, it was said that the most valued medicine that had ever been unveiled was an orange-colored medicine, which was the supremely valuable medicine that previously allowed a 4th tier, Heavenly Venerate, to break through to the 5th tier. Niu Buchuan was taken aback for a moment, and then burst out laughing, being extremely pleased with himself. Even if it was easier to unveil treasures in the mid-grade area, a cyan-colored great herb was still extremely rare. He was even feeling slightly regretful as he should have paid for it himself. Lung Xiran also showed a relaxed expression. This time he could be more at ease. The third piece, Niu Buchuan unveiled a scrap stone, while Ling Han once again harvested something. It seems there's some treasure, green in color. Is it divine metal? It's not clear yet. As they had no idea whether it was divine metal or something else, the staff naturally didn't dare to make too much movement and continued to carefully cut open the stone, peeling off more layers of stone. Gasp! Suddenly everyone gasped. This was a great herb, and moreover it was of the green grade. The order was red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and then purple, so the green-colored great herb was naturally better than the cyan-colored great herb. This point didn't need to be considered at all. Ling Han had gained the upper hand. Lung Xiran's expression immediately crumbled. One had to know that his life was on the line this time. "Young Master Lung, don't worry, don't worry. The game is far from over. Please believe me. I will definitely turn defeat into victory," Niu Buchuan said hastily. Lung Xiran suppressed his wildly throbbing heart and nodded. Before this, Ling Han had also made a comeback on the last raw stone and managed to reverse a losing game in one fell swoop. Why couldn't they? This was the wonder of stone gambling. No one would know the outcome of the gamble until the last moment. Continue. In cutting open the 4th pair, yes, both sides still continued to get scrap stones. Then came the 5th pair. Ling Han continued to unearth a piece of divine metal, while Niu Buchuan got another great herb, but it was of the lowest grade, purple. The two plants together couldn't compare to Ling Han's one plant. However, in the end, the gap had been drawn closer by a bit. Again, for the 6th pair, Ling Han still got a piece of divine metal, while Niu Buchuan continued his good luck and got another great herb, but this time it was cyan-colored again. The combination of these 3 great herbs could just barely contend with the green-colored great herb. Lung Xiran calmed down again, as now the two sides had basically returned to the same starting line. Ling Han remained calm. He had already grasped the entire game in his hands. The 7th pair. Ling Han opened up a piece of scrap stone, while Niu Buchuan opened up a purple-colored great herb. Although it was only purple-colored, which was the lowest grade, the combination of the 4 great herbs was slightly higher than the green-colored great herb in value because it could only improve one's cultivation level and shorten the duration of cultivation. Meanwhile, if one wanted to advance to the next cultivation level, it was said that only the orange-colored great herb was capable of facilitating it. This was the dividing range. 1 orange-colored great herb was more precious than 10 yellow-colored great herbs. Lung Xuran calmed down again, and even had a smile on his face. This time he was sure to win. For the 8th pair, both sides opened up to scrap stones, and it was the same for the 9th set. Now it would all depend on their respective 10th piece. If both sides continued to open up scrap stones, then it would be obvious that Lung Xuran had won. "Oh, master, do you need to play the game with such suspense?" Fu Tianqing complained inwardly. Although there was no evidence, he just believed that such a sequence of opening stones was within Ling Han's control. This master of his could really be very mean whenever he played around with people. "Open up the 10th piece," Ling Han said lightly. The 2 stonecutters picked up the last raw stone and began to cut it open. Chapter 2854. 2854 you bet, you pay slain. Chapter 2854. 2854 you bet, you pay slain. 2854 you bet, you pay slain. It's scrap. Niu Buchuin's raw stone had to be opened up first, but nothing came out of it and it was worthless. Even after every layer of stone had been peeled off, there still was nothing there. Niu Buchuin and Lung Xuran were both disappointed, but they kept comforting themselves internally. The possibility of Ling Han opening up a scrap stone was also quite high, and even if it wasn't a scrap stone, it was still impossible to reverse his defeat by unearthing a piece of divine metal. The stonecutter continued slashing his blade with extreme care, and a hint of primal chaos appeared very soon within the stone, looking as if mist. "No way!" everyone exclaimed. Another heavenly venerable seal. Goodness, how many years had it been that no heavenly venerable seal had appeared here, and now there are actually 2. This guy's luck is heaven-defying indeed, isn't it? Not necessarily. Perhaps he really possesses such an ability. Everyone was amazed. It was fine to say that you were lucky once, but twice in a row? Then it wouldn't be something that could be explained by luck, but rather the person's strength. Could it be that this guy is truly a grandmaster of raw stone? On the other side, Lung Xuran's face turned pale. He was betting his life against Ling Han. Great clouds, heavenly venerates, eyes lit up. 2 heavenly venerable seals? Ha ha ha. Then he would have reaped quite a good harvest. "I have lost," Niu Buchuin said bluntly. Facts spoke louder than words. 1 heavenly venerable seal was sufficient to reverse the slight advantage that he had previously possessed. Anyway, he was merely selecting a stone on behalf of another. Although losing was embarrassing, there was no real loss for him after all. There was no need for him to kowtow again, and he didn't need to pay with his life. Of course, he would never let Ling Han go so easily. This guy was obviously also a grandmaster of raw stone, and yet acted as a wolf in sheep's clothing, completely deceiving him. Later, he would go find his senior brother to bet against Ling Han with stones once again. He simply didn't believe that he wouldn't win the bet against him. Ling Han stretched out his hand to seize his prize, and all the medicine that Niu Buchuin had unearthed earlier fell into his hands. The winner took all. He looked at Lung Xuran. "You may kill yourself now." Lung Xuran trembled all over. How long did it take him to cultivate to the position of heavenly venerate, transcending the common world, and becoming able to supersede the regulations? How could he be willing to die? "I can give you a heavenly venerable seal in exchange for my life," he said. Ling Han shook his head. "This isn't what we had bet on. Don't be too overbearing." Lung Xuran gritted his teeth. He was a heavenly venerate, after all. Was the life of a heavenly venerate so worthless? Let me say something. The great clouds, heavenly venerate, suddenly spoke up. Where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Ling Han, for my sake, just treat the bet on his life as a joke. Anyway, you also have gained a lot. Lang Xiran was overjoyed and quickly clasped his fists in respect towards the great clouds, heavenly venerate. Thank you, my lord. He vaguely remembered that the great clouds, heavenly venerate, had a friendly relationship with his father, but it was too long ago, and he had only just realized it. A fourth tier, heavenly venerate, had spoken up already. How could it be that Ling Han would dare to not give him face? Ling Han looked at the great clouds, heavenly venerate, and said indifferently, "What does this matter have to do with you?" The great clouds, heavenly venerate, frowned. "I am simply asking you to give me face on this matter. Are you not willing to do so?" Ling Han shook his head. "Firstly, I don't want to give it anyway, and secondly, you don't deserve to be given this much face." "What?" The great clouds, heavenly venerate, was taken aback for a moment. He'd never thought that Ling Han would reject him. Ling Han was merely a second tier, while the great clouds was 2 cultivation levels above him. It would be like a grandfather beating a grandson. How could Ling Han have the confidence to refuse? Fine, fine, fine. Great clouds, heavenly venerate, sneered. I insist on interfering in this matter. I would like to see how you can commit a crime in my face. Ling Han looked at the great clouds, heavenly venerate. Then the person to die will be more than one. Huh. Great clouds, heavenly venerate, sneered. This was funny indeed. A second tier, heavenly venerate, actually dared to threaten him? He was practically seeking death. Lang Xiran, you may take your leave. I don't believe that anyone will dare to hurt you, the great clouds said to Lang Xiran. Lang Xiran nodded. He didn't say anything further, as only his father would be qualified to repay this favor. He just needed to accept it. Ling Han moved and intercepted Lang Xiran. Humph! The great clouds, heavenly venerate, sneered. If you dare to make a move here, you'll see how I'm going to crush you. Why was an elite of 4th tier placed in charge here? Naturally, it was to oversee the territory. If someone was to seize the raw stone and run away with it, could it be that someone from other raw stone lanes was needed to stop it? One naturally ought to resolve one's own affairs internally, unless it would affect others. Ling Han directly channeled the 14th seal, boosting his power by 47 times. In an instant, endless power burst forth within him. Pum! He punched out, dispersed the blow of the great clouds, heavenly venerate, and instantly caught up with Lang Xiran, without pausing in the slightest. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed the other party's neck. Lang Xiran was shocked. How could he have imagined that even a move by an elite of the 4th tier would not be able to stop Ling Han? He wanted to dodge or block the attack, but he was like an ant in front of Ling Han. Tung, tung, tung. The great clouds, heavenly venerate, retreated 17 steps consecutively before finally regaining his footing. But Lang Xiran had already fallen into Ling Han's hands and was being held like a dead dog. A 1st tier, heavenly venerate. It was a joke. There was the sound of sighing all around, and some people were so shocked that their mouths fell open and couldn't be closed. What was happening? A dignified 4th tier, heavenly venerate, was actually pushed back by a 2nd tier, heavenly venerate. Although everyone knew that Ling Han was a freak who had previously broken records repeatedly, witnessing this unbelievable scene with their own eyes still caused everyone to go numb with shock. At this moment, it was difficult to believe indeed. Is this the peerless freak? He has surpassed 2 cultivation levels. I think that even Xian Chihu and Wu Haoyang, could they have such battle prowess when they were 2nd tier, heavenly venerates? Ling Han actually didn't even glance at the great clouds, heavenly venerate. A 4th tier, heavenly venerate, could only fight him to a draw at most. And furthermore, trash like the great clouds, heavenly venerate, only made him feel disdainful. He merely gazed at Lang Xiran and said indifferently, No one is exempt from repaying a debt owed to me. Lung Xuran felt chills all over his body. What kind of freak was Ling Han that even a fourth tier couldn't even suppress him? Lung Xuran initially wanted to intimidate Ling Han with his father's name, but even the great cloud's heavenly venerate was no match for Ling Han. So what was the use of his father's name? Spare me, he tremblingly said, after losing his trump card, and if he still didn't want to die, the only way out would be to beg for mercy. You bet you pay, Ling Han said lightly as a destructive force surged out of his right hand, instantly obliterating Lung Xuran's life. Immediately, a majestic force flowed into Ling Han's body, turning into nourishment for him. Here it was again. Ling Han frowned slightly. Of course, it was a good thing that his cultivation level could be increased speedily, but this ability was too weird. He still couldn't pinpoint the reason, but it made him feel uneasy from the bottom of his heart. Fine. The great cloud's heavenly venerate looked at Ling Han intensely. He sensed that Ling Han's power could crush him, and it was all because the other party could channel heavenly venerable seals that were of much higher levels than him. This could only be said to be explosive power. If he couldn't obliterate this person in seconds, the rest would depend on the usual battle prowess in the end. He was confident that as long as he persevered through Ling Han's burst of power, he would be able to suppress this freak who was younger than him by who knew many years. Brat, only one of us can live, he spat out word by word. Chapter 2855. 2855, we compete again tomorrow. Chapter 2855. 2855, we compete again tomorrow. 2855, we compete again tomorrow. Ling Han naturally was not afraid, and merely smiled slightly. All right, if you want to fight, I will oblige. The great cloud's heavenly venerate looked coldly at Ling Han. If you dare to step out of the city, I will definitely take your life. The two of them should be extremely close to equal in strength. If they went all out in battle, it was possible that the whole culmination city would be destroyed. Though the great cloud's heavenly venerate was a fourth tier, he did not dare to cause such great trouble. After all, there were too many high-level heavenly venerates here. Ling Han waved a hand dismissively. Whatever. This old geezer really did not know what was good for him. Ling Han just had to kill him then. The great cloud's heavenly venerate humphed, and left with a flourish of his sleeves. His eyes were filled with killing intent. It was not just because Ling Han had killed the son of his old friend in front of him. He also coveted the heavenly venerable seals that Ling Han possessed. This was just right. He could use this battle to kill Ling Han, and then extract his heavenly venerable seals from him. This old geezer was venomous. Though Ling Han could not possibly guess what was going through the mind of the great cloud's heavenly venerate entirely, he could guess a little. He sneered. Then he would just take a good roam around this area and take away all the best stuff of the raw stone lane. Master, should we leave? Fu Tianqing asked. Ling Han glared at him. What are we leaving for? He just didn't like this brat, always exchanging looks with his precious daughter and not acting reserved at all. He was really going to die out of fury. Father! She walked over, looking at Ling Han with a smile. This was a gentle threat. Even if Ling Han had overwhelming strength, in front of his daughter, he could only admit defeat. He did not speak further, and continued picking raw stones here indignantly. Without a gamble, he naturally could not be too showy. He only selected those raw stones that contained treasure and bought them. He definitely would not be cutting the stones here. If that happened, it would be equivalent to helping to advertise this raw stone lane. Moreover, one should profit quietly. He could not show off here, though he was already very showy. As Ling Han walked, he chose all those raw stones that contained great herbs and heavenly venerable seals. Actually, this kind of raw stone was extremely rare, even in the mid-grade area. He had only chosen 7 raw stones, and all of them contained great herbs. As for heavenly venerable seals, how could there be so many? He had really been too lucky to actually be able to unearth one from each area. Ling Han, do you dare to accept another gamble? Just when Ling Han had decided to pack up and leave so he could continue tomorrow, a voice suddenly rang out. After all, though Ling Han could see through the raw stones, Heavenly Venerable Tier Divine sense should not be able to penetrate them in the first place, so it was actually quite exhausting for him as well. After looking through over 10,000 raw stones in a row, he was slightly tired. Ling Han turned around and saw that the speaker was Niu Buchuan. Hasn't he learned enough from his last lesson? Haven't you lost enough yet? Ling Han asked smilingly. Niu Buchuan was indignant. Though he had lost twice in a row, that was all because Ling Han had been too lucky encountering a Heavenly Venerable seal every time. It should be known that even if some raw stone lanes opened all the stones in their stores, it would actually be impossible to have even one Heavenly Venerable seal. His opponent had been too lucky, and it was no fault of his. Just look at his records. Had his chances of coming out with treasure been lower than Ling Han? Even a Grandmaster of raw stone did not have eyes that could see right into the contents of the raw stone. With his standards, it was already quite acceptable to have found so many good raw stones. This time, my senior brother will be competing with you, Niu Buchuan declared. Only now did Ling Han look towards the person that was standing next to Niu Buchuan. That looked to be a young man in his 20s. Wearing a smile on his face, he appeared very approachable and far less arrogant than Niu Buchuan. Yet you only had to take a closer look, and you would be able to tell that he was actually even more arrogant than Niu Buchuan, because even Niu Buchuan could not stand too closely to him, and had carefully retreated around 9 meters, as if he was escorting a senior. What great airs! Brother Ling, my name is Bao Fingyu, this young man said, clasping his hands in greeting. Oh, Ling Han merely nodded, indicating that he knew, and did not say anything perfunctory like, I've long since heard of your great name. This made Bao Fingyu slightly displeased, who did not respectfully address him as Grandmaster Bao upon meeting him. This brat was indeed arrogant enough. Hiss, it really is Grandmaster Bao. This is the true disciple of Grandmaster Xianlai, and his accomplishments in the field of stone gambling are extremely astounding. It is said that he has once unearthed a primitive beast. Is this true? There were still a lot of people nearby who had not yet dispersed, and when they heard Bao Fingyu's name, they were all moved and astonished. They all approached to greet him, addressing him as Grandmaster Bao, and Bao Fingyu finally showed a hint of smile at this. This Bao Fingyu actually has some background. Master, you need to be careful, Fu Tianqing said, drawing near him. Ling Han was just about to toss a glare at him, but when he spotted the warning glance from his daughter, he could only reply, My dear disciple, I thank you for your concern. He was almost spitting these words through clenched teeth. The daughter he had doted on and cherished for so long was about to be snatched away, and he actually had to force a smile. He really wanted to beat someone up. He could not beat this heart-stealing thief. But weren't there still 2 idiots here? Ling Han set his eyes on Bao Fingyu and Niu Buchuan. I just happened to be in a bad mood, and you guys have delivered yourselves right to my door. Sure then, we can compete, Ling Han said nonchalantly. The rules are the same. The winner takes all, Bao Fingyu said. However, if you lose, I want to add another condition. You will return those 10 kowtows to my junior brother. TSK, TSK, TSK. He was really quite ruthless. However, this also showed how greatly confident he was, clearly assured that he would win against Ling Han. Ling Han smiled calmly. Then I, too, will add my own condition. If I win, I will beat both of you brutally, but I will make sure I will leave one last breath of life for you guys. Bao Fingyu couldn't help but frown. He was not Niu Buchuan. Niu Buchuan had just graduated and had not opened many raw stones, so he did not have much fame. However, Bao Fingyu was different. He had already graduated hundreds of millions of years ago, and the number of raw stones he had opened was uncountable. Furthermore, he had also personally unearthed countless treasures, to say nothing of low-level heavenly venerates. Even 4th tier and 5th tier heavenly venerates would treat him as a respected guest, and were very polite, which caused him to slowly develop an extremely arrogant temper. It was very simple. He had been spoiled, rotten by their treatment. This brat actually dared to say he would beat him up brutally. Bao Fengyu was inwardly furious. Originally, he had just been convinced by Niu Buchuan, seeing as the two of them had been tutored under the same master. He had come here. If Ling Han gave in and took the initiative to apologize, he could not be bothered to be too forceful either. But with how Ling Han was acting, he was really outraged now. "We will go into the high-grade area," Bao Fengyu said. Why were they going into the high-grade area? That was because the winner would take all. He wanted to take possession of the treasures that Ling Han unearthed free of charge. In the high-grade area, there was no need to have very high appraisal skills. One could choose some good stuff just with luck alone. He naturally wanted to take advantage of this. Ling Han waved a hand. "I'm slightly tired today. We will continue tomorrow." Was this guy afraid and would be running later? Bao Fengyu nodded slowly. Agreed. He had already made his decision. Later, he would command a few people to keep watch over Ling Han, preventing him from leaving Culmination City. With the social network he had established through these years of stone gambling, it was definitely no problem for him to get the help of several 4th-tier heavenly venerates. He had heard that even the Great Cloud's heavenly venerate could not stop Ling Han, so there was naturally no way he would have 2nd or 3rd tiers keep an eye on Ling Han. Then we will compete tomorrow. Chapter 2856. 2856 Competing with Bao Fengyu again. Chapter 2856. 2856 Competing with Bao Fengyu again. 2856 Competing with Bao Fengyu again. This time, Ling Han was not playing around with Bao Fengyu. He really was slightly tired and needed to rest. Of course, it was not impossible for him to forcefully proceed. But why did he have to do that? In any case, the raw stones would not be going anywhere, and the two people who were waiting for a beating had already stretched themselves out, so it was fine to keep the two of them hanging. There was no one here. When Ling Han and his group left, they just found a random spot and then entered into the spatial celestial tool. Naturally, they would be able to get a good rest. Of course, if this was in the wild, they would have to be careful and guard against the sudden palm strike from a heavenly venerate. If that happened, a spatial celestial tool would not be able to block it. Ling Han wanted to use a great volume of devouring metal to forge a spatial container just like the Black Tower that really would be considered well fortified, and even a heavenly venerate would have to expend a great deal of effort to be able to open it. It was very difficult in the past. After all, there was too little devouring metal available, and Ling Han had to depend on devouring metal to be able to take that last final step. However, when this primitive dimension was discovered, it did not seem like it would be anything too hard to find another piece of devouring metal. Never mind this for now. Ling Han rested well. Using his brain, too much was indeed tiring. A day later, they came out of the celestial guest residence and returned to the raw stone lane of yesterday. Hey, why were there so many people? Though there had been many spectators yesterday, there had only been around 100 of them. But what was going on today? To say nothing of 100,000 or 80,001. There were definitely 30,000 to 40,000 people here. Even if this raw stone lane was very big, there was still a feeling of being stuffed to the brim. This was because two grandmasters of raw stone were going to compete in stone gambling, which naturally caused a great commotion. Ling Han had achieved fame in a fell swoop, defeating Niu Buchuan by unearthing 2 heavenly venerable seals in a row. This was definitely not due to luck. Furthermore, Bao Fengyu was even more famous. He was the respected guest of a great many high-level heavenly venerates, and it was not clear how many people wanted to befriend him. And now, 2 grandmasters of raw stone had made an agreement for stone gambling, and it was a weird gamble at that, which was naturally an even greater gimmick which people flocked towards. Ling Han scratched his head. If he had known earlier, he would not have decided to compete here. Wasn't this just free publicity for this raw stone lane? Never mind. In any case, this raw stone lane did not belong to the great clouds, heavenly venerate, after all. Ling Han, you really dared to come, Bao Fengyu said coldly. He had endured for a whole day, and he really was displeased to the extreme now. He couldn't be bothered to put on his usual act of being approachable and friendly anymore. Ling Han was surprised. Why would I not? I am a great heavenly venerate, and you are but a mere 9th heaven. How could it be that I would be scared of you? You are disrespecting a heavenly venerate, so be careful that I don't skin you for that. Bao Fenyu's expression changed drastically. The present world situation had spoiled grandmasters of raw stone to be arrogant and willful, but everyone knew that there ultimately would come a day when raw stones would be mined completely. At that time, the so-called grandmasters of raw stone would just be trash. In the past, they had strutted around proudly in front of heavenly venerates, forcing them to smile and speak to them. Did one really think that heavenly venerates had no temper? Heavenly venerates were those that even the heavens had to respect, so how could disrespect be condoned? Once the time came, it was definite that a great number of raw stone grandmasters would be called to an accounting, and they would suffer a tragic end. But it could not be helped. Being flattered in this manner by heavenly venerates, how could one not swell up with pride? For example, Bao Fengyu's natural talent in cultivation was actually average, and he had just barely made it into the celestial king tier. Originally, he should have just attained the 1st heaven at most, but who would have imagined that he would be extremely talented in stone gambling? This gave him a new lease on life. Hence, with the great number of treasures poured on him, he was forcefully pushed to the heights of the 9th heaven. Of course, heavenly venerable tier was not something that could be attained by forceful pushing. This really was the final destination of his boundless lifetime. But going from the 1st heaven to 9th heaven was already an incredibly astonishing leap. Everything was due to his ability in stone gambling, so how could he not be proud? How could his ego not get greater and greater? How could his heirs not become bigger as time passed? And now these words from Ling Han seemed to have shattered the false words that he had used to numb himself, and clearly show that he was only in 9th heaven, while the former was a lofty heavenly venerate. Bao Fenyu's expression was livid, and his heart grew resentful. So what if Ling Han was a heavenly venerate? Bao Fenyu might not be able to reach heavenly venerable tier, but he could make heavenly venerates lower their heads, or even kneel down and kowtow to him. Spare the nonsense and begin the competition, he shouted at Ling Han. Ling Han set his eyes on this man. Had the present grandmasters of raw stone really been spoiled rotten? Fine then, he would strike a blow to these people's pride today. They entered the high-grade area of this raw stone lane. The great cloud's heavenly venerate was already standing by here. His expression was not friendly. He had accumulated a whole day of anger, and this was a little harsh on him. Everyone is limited to taking 3 pieces. Agreed? Bao Fengyu asked Ling Han. Sure. Ling Han nodded. The raw stones in this high-grade area were truly expensive. At the very least, they would have to be bought with the blood of heavenly venerates. There were around 100 of them in total. The smallest was only the size of a fist, while the largest was more than 3 meters tall. But the similarity was that every raw stone was covered with a dense network of veiled patterns, and there was a mysterious design about them, as if they themselves were heavenly venerable seals. Of course, this was only a misconception. The high-grade area could also produce scrap stones, but relatively speaking, the number was much smaller, and the chance of unearthing something valuable was considerably higher as well. The time limit is 1 day, Bao Fengyu continued. Okay, Ling Han agreed casually. He really didn't care. The two of them did not speak further, and began their selection of raw stones. I really had not imagined that Ling Han would really be so amazing to actually be competing with Grandmaster Bao. What Grandmaster Bao? There was one thing that Ling Han did not say wrong. He is a mere ninth heaven, capable of discerning a few stones, and he dares to act superior in front of a heavenly venerate? That's right. He must have been spoiled by others. As expected, Ling Han is a real troublemaker. This is truly impressive. Humph! It's about time to deliver a harsh strike to the pride of those so-called Grandmasters of Rawstone so that they can recognize who they are and what their true status is. But did you guys notice something? In the past, the Grandmasters of Rawstone were all celestial kings, and not one of them was a heavenly venerate. Now that you're saying it, that really is the case. It seems like there is a unique power that has prevented a heavenly venerate from becoming a Grandmaster of Rawstone. Up until now, everyone looked towards Ling Han. He really was a freak. He was the first to achieve Thesa. Heavenly Venerate was also able to become a Grandmaster of Rawstone. This is like a curse. Heavenly Venerates can get no reaction from heavenly venerable stones. It should be the power of heaven and earth that is messing around, right? It may also be that the fundamental powers of the Genesis world are incompatible with heavenly venerable stones. Everyone began to wonder and made their deductions. It was not clear who had guessed some part of it, but it was also possible that all of them were wrong. Setting them aside, Ling Han walked slowly, stretching out his hands to lay them on the raw stones. With the level of his proficiency now, he really just had to touch them with his hand, and the contents of the raw stone would appear completely in his mind's eye. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. The chances of treasure were really high in the high-grade area, but it was not definite that the possibility of truly valuable treasure being unearthed would be higher than the mid-grade area, or even the low-grade area. At least, he had not encountered a single heavenly venerable seal up till now. There were few raw stones here, so he would have to move faster and grab those raw stones that he thought were excellent. However, because the gamble was going to be decided based on 3 raw stones, the number of raw stones he could grasp could not exceed 3. If there were more than 3, he would have to replace those extra ones he had picked out. Otherwise, if he took all the raw stones, what would his opponent do? After touching around 20 of them, Ling Han finally picked his first one. There was a great herb inside here. It was a green-colored great herb and was extremely old. He picked through over a dozen more pieces, and Ling Han chose his second piece. This was another great herb, but it was green in color. Just when he was about to make a whole circle around the 100 stones, Ling Han touched a raw stone, and a hint of shock involuntarily showed in his expression. Chapter 2857 2,857 3 raw stones. Chapter 2857 2,857 3 raw stones. 2857 3 raw stones. There was treasure in this raw stone, but it was actually an earthworm. Really, this raw stone was only the size of a fist and completely red in color. It was covered with a dense network of veins laid out in a pattern. Was this considered a primitive beast? Ling Han rubbed his chin. Would this eventually become an earthworm, heavenly venerate in the future? After some thought, he still picked up this raw stone. A raw stone that contained a primitive beast was extremely rare. Even if it was not for the sake of this gamble, he was also interested to play around with it. In any case, he had already glanced through all the raw stones here, so it was definite that he could win. A day later, the two of them had chosen their 3 raw stones. "I will open them myself," Baofengyu said. He preferred to personally open his own. Stones. The scene of cheers from all the people around him when precious treasures were revealed excited him greatly. Ling Han did not mind either way, and he said to the stonecutter next to him, "You help me open." "Yes, my lord." The stonecutter hurriedly nodded. He was only the equivalent of ascending origin tier. In front of a heavenly venerate, He was an existence that could not be any more negligible. Open this one first. Ling Han pointed at that raw stone that contained a blue-colored great herb. The stonecutter started, and Bao Fengyu started moving as well. Though raw stones were not very hard, it was also a task of labor for an ascending origin tier. Hence, the stonecutter was moving very slowly, while Bao Fengyu's movements were fast. Layer after layer of stone was scraped off, and a hint of blue was revealed very soon. "Is it divine metal?" someone asked. "If it was divine metal, then it would be worthless." "It's not divine metal, it's a great herb." Someone's eyes immediately focused. Bao Fengyu showed a hint of pride and sliced a few more times. As expected, the shape of a herb could just be vaguely seen. That really is a great herb. It has to be admitted that he does indeed have some skills. He is worthy of being called a grandmaster. He is Niu Buchuin's senior brother, after all, the most senior disciple of Grandmaster Xianlai. Everyone was musing ruefully. Bao Fengyu might be proud, but he did have the right to be. At least he could enjoy outstanding social status and become a respected guest of heavenly venerates in this dimension before the raw stones were completely mined. Very quickly, this great herb was unearthed, and it was completely blue in color. Though it is only blue in color, it is still impressive. Everyone shook their head. Some wanted to offer bids, yet they were convinced by others not to. That was because this was stone gambling. Before this ended, who knew whom this great herb would ultimately belong to? The stonecutter was much slower, and he had only just scraped off the outermost layer of stone after quite a while. There's treasure here as well," someone called out. "That's very normal. This is the high-grade area. The chances of encountering treasure are very high, but most of the time it is actually still divine metal." Someone beside him shook his head. True. The person from before no longer thought this was anything strange, and decided to just wait and see. Everyone was watching them, and even if Bao Fengyu's expression was filled with pride and nonchalance, he stopped his movements and directed his attention to the other side. And Niu Buchuin even stretched out his neck to look. He really could not afford to lose. Green. Is it green-colored divine metal? Or a green-colored great herb? Everyone could confirm that this was definitely not a heavenly venerable seal, but whether it was divine metal, a great herb, or a primitive beast, it still could not be distinguished yet. Cut, cut, cut. That stonecutter sliced carefully and scraped off layer after layer of stone, revealing even more of the contents. It is a great herb. It is a green-colored great herb. Heavens! Everyone exclaimed in surprise. This really was coincidental. Bao Fengyu had just unearthed a great herb, and Ling Han did as well. Furthermore, there was no need to compare the two. Green was better than blue, and this was something that everyone knew very well. In the first round, it was Ling Han's victory. Bao Fengyu's expression was slightly livid, but he was not too concerned. He had deliberately decided this sequence of stone cutting, and the objects that would be unearthed from the remaining two would be even better. He did not say anything, and continued his stone cutting. Very quickly, enough of the stone had been scraped off, revealing yet another color that was not grayish-white. "It is a green-colored great herb," someone exclaimed. Bao Fengyu was proud of himself. Did everyone think that he could not pick out any treasures? Ling Han merely smiled, and as the stonecutter slowly and carefully did his work, a color that was not grayish-white was also revealed here. Green! It can't be right. Everyone faltered. Just now, Bao Fengyu had unearthed a blue-colored great herb, and Ling Han had immediately countered with a green-colored great herb, which was just slightly better. Now, Bao Fengyu had unearthed a green-colored great herb, yet it was possible that Ling Han had unearthed a hint of green, which meant that his odds were still slightly better. Could it be so coincidental twice? No, no, no. How could there be so many coincidences in this world? But if Ling Han had deliberately arranged the sequence like this, that would have been even more frightening. This meant that not only did Ling Han know the raw stones that he had chosen like the back of his hand, he was also very aware of his opponent's cards as well. But was that possible? These were raw stones, and even 7th tier heavenly venerates could not possibly see through them. Everyone was staring intently, wanting nothing more than to kick that stonecutter aside. "You are too fucking slow." "I'll do it." A heavenly venerate could no longer hold back. Scrambling forwards, he pushed the stonecutter aside, directly using his hand like a blade to slice through the stone. The power of heavenly venerable tier was naturally sharper than divine metal, and this was the hand of a heavenly venerate at that, so he naturally could control it at will. Very quickly, a green-colored great herb appeared. It really is. Everyone couldn't help but wear a strange expression. This had been deliberate. This was definitely deliberate. The heavenly venerate that had opened the stone showed a hint of surprise. "This is not a great herb for improving cultivation level." "Ah." Everyone gasped again. Then what was it? Bao Fengyu and Niu Buchuan both sighed in relief. Were they about to reverse their situation now? "This is a saintly medicine for healing injuries, which is even rarer," that heavenly venerate said. "What?" Instantly, many people's eyes became bloodshot. Though heavenly venerates were said to be respected by even the heavens, in truth, their existence was not condoned by the heaven and earth. Hence, when a heavenly venerate suffered injuries, they had to heal their own injuries. No medicine would be effective because heavenly venerates had surpassed regulations. So how could medicines that were still within the range of regulations be effective? But in this separated dimension, celestial medicines had wilted who knew how many years ago, yet had been mysteriously sealed in stones, absorbing the fundamental powers of the Genesis world for countless years, which allowed them to be capable of advancing the cultivation level of cultivators. And the even rarer great herbs could heal the injuries sustained by a heavenly venerate. It was true that heavenly venerates could recover injuries automatically, but what time would they have for self-recovery in battle? Thus, the value of this kind of great herb was amazing, superior to that of other green-colored great herbs. That heavenly venerate reluctantly handed this great herb to Ling Han, and couldn't help but ask, "Brother Ling, would you mind parting with a leaf?" Ling Han smiled. "Let's talk about this later." That heavenly venerate nodded. The competition had not yet ended. He was too anxious. "Senior brother, what should we do?" Niu Buchuan looked towards Bao Fengyu, so nervous that cold sweat was dripping down his forehead. Bao Fengyu's expression was livid, and he exclaimed, "What is the rush? There is still the last piece." He did not believe that Ling Han's 3rd raw stone would still be able to surpass his. He definitely would be turning the tables on Ling Han. He moved and began to cut into the last raw stone. Bao Fengyu was filled with confidence. The 3rd raw stone would definitely reveal some extremely rare treasure. His insight would definitely not be mistaken. However, as white stone scraps flew, the stone continuously shrank in size, but not a single bit of thing was revealed. Finally, this was proven to be a scrap stone. Bao Fengyu's mouth was half gaping, his expression extremely complicated and very hilarious. Chapter 2858. 2858 Arrogant Attitude. Chapter 2858. 2858 Arrogant Attitude. 2858 Arrogant Attitude. Initially, Bao Fengyu had hoped that he would be able to turn the whole situation around with the last raw stone. Yet reality struck him a heavy blow. It was actually a scrap stone. Originally, this would be very normal. Even a grandmaster of raw stone could not guess accurately every time. However, he had his heart set on turning this defeat into victory, yet could not even glimpse the slightest bit of hope. So how could he not feel dejected? That heavenly venerate from before continued the stone cutting. Actually, this was a very strong feeling of accomplishment to personally unearth a rare treasure. Even a heavenly venerate would be emotionally moved. Though he had already opened one, he did not mind opening another. He soon exclaimed in surprise because he could already see a slight part of the form inside. "What is it?" the people around him all asked. "Strange," he murmured to himself. Everyone was extremely curious. Just what is strange? Can't you just say it directly? That heavenly venerate continued opening the stone. With how strong his power was, the layers of stone turned to dust and fluttered down with a rub of his hand, soon revealing the object that lay within. Everyone had a strange expression. It was no wonder that the heavenly venerate would feel it was strange. They, too, felt this was strange. There was actually an earthworm inside. It was completely pink, looking no different than any ordinary breed. There was actually an earthworm contained inside the raw stone. Could this also be considered a primitive beast? Everyone grimaced at this slightly. Only Ling Han could unearth something like this which would render others speechless. Ling Han set the matter aside for now, and directly grabbed the 2 great herbs that Bao Fengyu had unearthed. Whatever the 3rd raw stone contained, he had already won. Pung, pung, pung. He moved quickly, giving a severe beating to Bao Fengyu and Niu Buchuan. He had never accepted being threatened. If anyone dared to provoke him, he would be beating them up. If anyone wanted to kill him, he would kill them in return. After the beating, Ling Han glanced at the great cloud's heavenly venerate. If this old geezer made a move on him, he would definitely hold nothing back. The great cloud's heavenly venerate's heart involuntarily stopped for a moment, but he immediately looked back at Ling Han. How could it be that he would be afraid? "I hope you can keep it up. Don't give up, don't lose hope, and continue to challenge me to stone gambling," Ling Han said to Bao Fengyu and Niu Buchuan. These 2 were quite good people, spending money to present gifts to him. They should be praised. Both Bao Fengyu and Niu Buchuan were depressed. Hearing Ling Han's words, wasn't this just treating them like bringers of wealth? They were both indignant and furious, wanting nothing more than to swallow Ling Han alive. "Ling Han, don't be too proud of yourself. We will ask our master to come, and he will definitely defeat you," Bao Fengyu shouted. "I very much anticipate that," Ling Han said smilingly. Here was another person going to present gifts to him. He naturally welcomed that very much. Humph! Niu Buchuan and Bao Fengyu left angrily. They would definitely ask their master to appear and defeat Ling Han. Brother Ling Han. Once the 2 of them left, a great many people instantly gathered around him. They were all longing for the great herbs in Ling Han's possession. If this had not been in Culmination City, where the destruction caused by a battle of heavenly venerates would be too severe and would draw the suppression of powerful figures, they would have definitely already made their move by now. They all wanted to buy the great herbs in Ling Han's possession, especially that healing type. It could very possibly save their lives. Ling Han tossed out these words. If they wanted to buy, sure, but it could only be traded for heavenly venerable seals. He had no shortage of divine metal. Moreover, just look at the high-grade area. Since when was divine metal accepted for the purchase of raw stones here? Even raw stones could not be bought with divine metal. What more supremely valuable medicine? Ling Han continued shopping here, buying all the valuable raw stones. For this, he paid a price of 4 supremely valuable medicines, but his gains far surpassed his costs. However, there was not a single heavenly venerable seal to be seen, which Ling Han was inevitably disappointed by. However, it was already acceptable to have managed to obtain 2 heavenly venerable seals in a single raw stone lane. Ling Han took these raw stones and left. He was in no rush to unearth the great herbs. Actually, raw stones were the best material for preservation. Once they were unearthed, the essence of the medicine would inevitably begin to disperse. He closely examined that earthworm, but what was disappointing was that this earthworm had long since lost all signs of life. However, after a closer look, he discovered that this was actually not a real earthworm, but rather a great herb. This should be celestial medicine, and it was presently in the stage of taking form. Before it had completed this stage, it had encountered an unknown calamity, and had then been sealed inside this raw stone. Hence, though it had absorbed a great amount of fundamental power of the Genesis world, it was presently neither a great herb nor a beast, which was extremely strange. Ling Han put the earthworm away. Though he did not know what it could be used for now, he might have some use for it in future. He had also unearthed several great herbs, the kind that could improve cultivation level, which he handed to the Empress, Hunyao and Ling Shi respectively. As for Fu Tianqing, he was still tempering his foundations and had not yet advanced to the heavenly venerable tier. So even if he consumed it now, it would only be wasted. Who would complain about having a higher cultivation level? After Ling Han had digested all these great herbs, he decided to move out again. He deliberately exited Culmination City. If anyone had any designs on him, he would settle the matter once and for all. He possessed the ability to turn the life essence of heavenly venerates into his own cultivation. Though he did not very much want to use this ability, who asked others to be so determined to deliver themselves to him, he would not waste their efforts. He arrived outside the city and did not hide his tracks at all. It was as if he was just asking for them to rob him. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. Even the great cloud's heavenly venerate did not appear, which caused his anticipation to come to naught. He returned to Culmination City and continued to rake invaluable raw stones. Ling Han. He had just entered a city when he saw someone calling out to him. Ling Han glanced over. This was only a ninth heaven celestial king. He couldn't help but show a hint of displeasure. What was wrong with this world? Did ninth heaven celestial kings not know that they should respect heavenly venerates? My young master would like to see you, this celestial king said. I refuse, Ling Han directly rejected. Ling Han, don't be an ungrateful wretch. My young master, Yu Qinguang, is the only son of a sixth-tier heavenly venerate, this celestial king announced proudly, clearly threatening Ling Han. Ling Han was surprised. This guy actually dared to threaten him. He shook his head. If he wants to meet me, he should come personally. Doesn't he have any legs? Ling Han, don't be an ungrateful wretch, that celestial king shouted loudly, a sneer on his face. Pah! Ling Han delivered a slap from the distance, and that celestial king was instantly sent flying. Ling Han stated evenly, if you continue blustering, I will take your life. That celestial king held a hand to his face, and finally did not dare to speak any further. He hurriedly turned and left. Ling Han did not take it to heart. Counter pawns with the king and water with an earth weir. Who would he fear? After meeting with the Empress and the others, they went to another raw stone lane. It was not big, but the size of the raw stone lane did not determine whether there would be treasure or not. Ling Han discovered 2 great herbs there, which he was very pleased about. He quietly bought a few raw stones and did not let anyone know just how great his profits were. Very quickly he went to a small shop. Half a day later he left a smile on his face. Unfortunately, though he had obtained quite a few great herbs, he did not find even a single heavenly venerable seal, which left him slightly disappointed. After visiting 3 small shops in a row, Ling Han decided to take a look at a bigger raw stone lane. This time, neither the Empress nor Hunyao wanted to follow him and waste their time. To spend the whole day looking at stones was really too boring. Hence, Ling Han entered into the raw stone lane in the company of Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing. Chapter 2859 2859 The Tyrannical Yu Qinguang. Chapter 2859 2859 The Tyrannical Yu Qinguang. 2859 The Tyrannical Yu Qinguang. Ling Han began to profit quietly, but the luck of his first time was really too good. Now, though, he could not find a 3rd heavenly venerable seal, no matter what he tried. At most, he only found great herbs, and this was very understandable. There was naturally no shortage of celestial medicines in a dimension. As long as there was enough time and the conditions for its growth were there, they could all become supremely valuable medicines. That stuff was still good. It could advance cultivation level and was greatly beneficial as well. Ling Han needed a frightening amount of energy to take a single step forward. Hence, not only did he need a great number of heavenly venerable seals, he also needed as many supremely valuable medicines as possible to push his cultivation level forwards. However, he could not completely concentrate because he was already very famous after his 3 rounds of stone gambling. Grandmaster Ling, can you help me to take a look at this raw stone? Brother Ling, won't you join me for a drink later? There would always be people trying to strike up a conversation with him. Some were very reserved, saying that they wanted to befriend him. But there were some that were extremely frank, directly asking him to help look at the raw stones. For those who were polite, Ling Han would politely refuse. He did not have that much time, and for those who had a lofty opinion of themselves, Ling Han ignored them completely. It dawned on him. That person who had demanded him to meet with the so-called young master probably had the motive of asking for his help in stone gambling. What a joke! How truly arrogant! Isn't he just good at stone gambling? Someone grumbled lowly at the sidelines. Shoot, could it be that you don't know that aside from being a grandmaster of raw stone, this guy is a supreme genius? It is said that he can match a 4th tier. Are you tired of living? Someone beside him warned quickly. Ling Han was not some other grandmaster of raw stone. He himself had battle prowess that was terrifying. Isn't that you, Chengwang? Someone suddenly looked towards the entrance. Tisk, TSK. The young master of the Yu clan. He is an extremely overbearing guy. I heard someone had unearthed a great herb not too long ago, and he forcefully snatched it without paying. Who said that it had been without paying? Hadn't he paid a piece of divine metal? His manners are really too bad. It can't be helped. Who asked a 6th tier, heavenly venerate to father him? He's probably here to play the same trick of gaining without risking anything of his again, isn't he? Who knows who's the one to catch his eye now? Everyone was whispering, but anyone who was a heavenly venerate could easily hear them. Naturally, these words were heard by that young master of the Yu clan as well. Yet Yu Chengwang showed a hint of pride. He did not fear others talking about him behind his back. This was only proof of how strong he was. Young Master Yu, that's him. Beside him, a man pointed at Ling Han. It was the celestial king that had stood in Ling Han's path at the city entrance, demanding him to meet with Yu Chengwang. To dare not give even me face, he is too brazen, isn't he? Yu Chengwang asked coldly. Since childhood, his words were like an imperial decree that no one dared to disobey. I shall see just how capable he is. He just stared at Ling Han from a distance. But what disappointed him was that Ling Han merely chose stones, but did not open them. After paying their price in divine metal, he would throw these pieces of raw stones into his spatial tool. A day later, Ling Han was satisfied. He had still raked in a good catch this time, and the only disappointment was that he still lacked a heavenly venerable seal. He planned to take a rest and then move again. Wait. Yu Chengwang had long since been waiting for him. Seeing that Ling Han was about to leave, he immediately raised an arm to block him. Ling Han looked towards him and frowned slightly. It is said that a good dog does not block the way. Looks like you are a vicious dog. Master, don't keep talking about dogs. Fu Tianqing hurriedly warned from the side. The large black dog might become rabid. Yu Chengwang grimaced slightly. You guys are really looking down on me, aren't you? He humphed. Ling Han, hand over the raw stones that you have just chosen. I will not let you suffer losses. I will buy them from you for double the original price. This was practically robbery. Hiring a grandmaster of raw stone would cost no small amount, but he actually wanted to buy the raw stones from him for double their cost. This was really black-hearted beyond words. Ling Han had never seen someone as shameless as this. Ling Han grinned in spite of himself. If you want raw stones, there are more than enough here. Furthermore, what reason is there for me to sell them to you? Simply because I am Yu Qingwang, Yu Qingwang declared proudly. You are putting on such great airs, aren't you? I invited you once, but that actually did not move you. Hee, you are really the first. Ling Han shook his head. I don't have the time to waste with an idiot like you. Get lost. Looks like you are really ungrateful, Yu Qingwang said coldly, yet stepped aside. He did not dare to make a move here. The consequences were something that not even he could bear. Moreover, though he was a third tier, he knew that there was no way he could match Ling Han. He would have to ask the elites in their alliance to interfere, to suppress Ling Han. When Ling Han passed him by, he said, Don't think that I will let the matter go just like this. It won't be too long, and you will beg to meet me, kneeling to ask for forgiveness from me. Ling Han turned to glance at him, and threw down a few words before leaving. Idiot. WH what? Yu Qingwang did not even dare to believe his ears. A great heavenly venerate would actually be so rude and actually throw insults. His expression was filled with malice. He swore that he would definitely make Ling Han regret this. Ling Han strode off. He had already foreseen this. As his strength in stone gambling was revealed, it would attract the eyes of many. Their motive was naturally wanting him to help them in stone gambling. He returned and unearthed a few great herbs. He handed them to the Empress and the others. Everyone could advance their cultivation level together. Ling Han was sure that there was no one that could suppress him once he advanced to the 4th tier, unless a 7th tier appeared. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others went into seclusion, digesting the benefits that they had reaped this time, but just when they came out of seclusion, they were greeted with the sight of a heavenly venerate. This man's surname was Ma, but his real name had long since gone out of use. His title was Highest North. Young lad. The Highest North heavenly venerate came straight to the point. By someone's request, I have purposely come to bring you a message. You had best beg for mercy from young Master Yu as soon as possible. If you do, you will still have a sliver of hope. Otherwise, Ling Han looked towards him. A great, dignified 4th tier, and you are actually playing the role of an errand boy for someone else. Don't you think that is demeaning to yourself? I am just fulfilling a request, young lad. If you don't give me face, take care lest I will be forceful towards you, the Highest North heavenly venerate said laughingly, as if he was joking. Ling Han also smiled. Then you should also be careful, sir. If I do make a move, I usually don't leave any survivors. The Highest North heavenly venerate's expression slightly darkened. He had not thought that not only would Ling Han ignore his advice, he would actually dare to turn around and threaten him as well. He laughed again. The young are really overtaking the old now. The youth of today really are very courageous. Ling Han merely smiled and did not reply. Behave yourself. The Highest North heavenly venerate threw down these words and left. But he had just left when a 4 sides heavenly venerate also came and said more or less the same words to Ling Han. This 4 sides heavenly venerate really had 4 expressions. At times it would be a grievously weeping face, which would then be filled with anger. At times his face would be all smiles or overcome with hilarity. Others would really think that he had lost his mind. Ling Han dealt with him similarly, but then came 2 6th tier 1 heavenly venerates, the gray space heavenly venerate and purple flames heavenly venerate. They all demanded that Ling Han take the initiative to plead mercy from Yu Qingwang, and only then would he have a chance of survival. This was Yu Qingwang's effort to show his strength to Ling Han. Chapter 2860 2860 Grandmaster Xianlai. Chapter 2860 2860 Grandmaster Xianlai. 2860 Grandmaster Xianlai. Ling Han naturally ignored them. Yu Qingwang could only seek the help of fourth-tier heavenly venerates. But when it came to the fourth tiers, Ling Han indeed wasn't fearful. He went about selecting and opening up the stones with peace of mind, and then used great herbs to improve his cultivation level. In the eyes of everyone, he was both high-profile and low-key. What was considered keeping a high profile? Was it not high-profile of him to defeat 2 Grandmasters of Raw Stone and kill a heavenly venerate subsequently? Moreover, every few days he would scurry around various raw stone lanes in Culmination City and purchase a large quantity of raw stones. But what was low-key was that Ling Han had never publicly opened up stones again, and now some people were even wondering if Ling Han had indeed won against Niu Buchuan and Bao Yufeng by virtue of his abilities, or he had just stumbled upon them by luck. Ling Han paid no heed to what other people thought as he made a fortune, secretly. In this Culmination City he stayed for more than 900 years, and the good things that he got were really amazing. However, some raw stone lanes had grown wary of him, and had put away certain raw stones that they believed to be their most valuable treasures, preventing him from having the chance to choose. Over the years, Ling Han had obtained a total of 71 heavenly venerable seals, which was extremely amazing. Although most of the heavenly venerable seals obtained were 9th grade seals, it allowed him to obtain 3 combination seals of this level, which could increase the battle prowess by 44 times, 29 times, and 13 times, respectively. At first glance, even the improvement by 44 times didn't exceed the 14th seal, but Ling Han wasn't far from completing the whole set of 9th grade seals. Once completed, the 111 heavenly venerable seals could all be combined in a series. At that time, it would be amazing indeed. Ling Han estimated that this would probably increase his battle prowess by more than 100 times, and could even surpass a first-grade heavenly venerable seal. On the other hand, he was furiously consuming great herbs, and his cultivation level was also improving rapidly, gradually approaching the middle stage of the 2nd tier. Only the middle stage of the 2nd tier. Had all these great herbs been given to the Empress or Hunyou, they would at least have been able to advance to another level, stepping into either the 3rd tier or 4th tier. But when it came to Ling Han, it couldn't be helped. The number of dimensions in his body was limitless, causing him to need an excessive amount of energy for every step forward in advancing to the next level. This was the path he had chosen, and he had already foreseen this day before he started taking this route. Hence, although he was a little jealous of the advancement of the Empress and Hunyou, he did not act too hastily. His strength was steadily rising, and the solidity of his foundation caused people to exclaim it was inconceivable. However, the peaceful days had finally been interrupted. A letter of challenge was sent to Ling Han. The challenger was Grandmaster Xianlai, an extremely famous Grandmaster of Raw Stone. The letter of challenge stated quite politely an intention to compete with Ling Han. There was no anger, appearing calm and serene instead. However, this person was the master of Niu Buchuan and Baofengyu. He intentionally came here to issue a challenge, so how could it just be a simple spar with Ling Han? Naturally, Ling Han wasn't afraid of competing. When it came to stone gambling, he did not fear even an elite of 7th tier. Let's compete then. He responded and accepted the challenge from Grandmaster Xianlai. When the news came out, the entire Culmination City was shaken. Grandmaster Xianlai was one of the first Grandmasters of raw stones. He seemed to have a natural sensitivity to raw stones, and the success rate of stone gambling was astonishingly high. It was precisely due to this that it was impossible for a character like him to stone gamble in Culmination City. Wouldn't that cause everything to be chaotic? This kind of Grandmaster of Raw Stone would be working with various major forces, and his main task was to help these forces control the raw stones that they mined. Those truly valuable items would be retained by them. It was impossible for them to be allowed to flow into the market. Of course, they were truly gambling with raw stones, unlike Ling Han, who could directly see through the raw stones, so it was inevitable that there would be things that might have slipped through the cracks. However, Ling Han had been cutting open raw stones in such a way, and almost all the heavenly venerable seals obtained over the past 900 years were of the 9th grade, which was enough to clear some doubts. The oldest batch of grandmasters of raw stones really did have actual caliber and genuine knowledge. Now, such a grandmaster of raw stone was about to stone gamble with Ling Han, which naturally caused a big commotion. How many years had it been that people hadn't seen a real grandmaster make a move? The competition venue is Severvoid Lane. That's the largest raw stone lane in Culmination City, jointly operated by 7 major forces. In the past, this was where the orange-colored great herb was unearthed. Unfortunately, the most valuable treasures aren't put up for sale at all, or I would have procured them a long time ago. You can just keep on boasting. The raw stones in the treasured area can only be purchased with a heavenly venerable seal or at least a yellow-colored great herb. With your little wealth, you still want to procure those treasures? Sigh, entry to the treasure area is strictly forbidden, so what's the use of having money? I've heard that in order to facilitate the competition between the 2 grandmasters, Severvoid Lane may open up the treasure area for the 2 grandmasters to select raw stones, and even the treasures of the store can also be selected. What? Then I must go take a look. I have always wanted to know what kind of good items can be obtained from those few treasures of the store. Amidst all the discussions, Ling Han came to Severvoid Lane. He stopped at the door, feeling quite rueful. That was because he had wanted to come here before, but he hadn't expected to be rejected. He also didn't know if it had been because Severvoid Lane had been afraid of his strength and had gone so far as to especially close the shop. If he had been the only one to be kicked out, then Ling Han would definitely have lost his temper. No one would do business like this. However, the other party was too much of a ruffian. They simply closed the shop to rest and kicked everyone out. So Ling Han couldn't lose his temper, even if he felt indignant. Oh, so we are not allowed to rest, is it? Now, the door here was finally open to him. Even after the stone gambling ended today, he also wouldn't leave so he could wipe out their goods. As soon as he entered the door, he saw an apprentice waiting inside. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately bowed and saluted. Grandmaster Ling, please follow me. That was still considered polite. Ling Han nodded and followed the other party. This time, the Empress and Hunyo still didn't come. Their personalities weren't suited for such an occasion at all. In the eyes of others, opening up a stone was a very exciting thing. But for the 2 women, it was merely a senseless waiting game, extremely boring. Therefore, Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing accompanied him this time. The 3 of them followed the apprentice, and soon came to a gazebo where they saw an old man sitting upright and 2 people standing behind him. Who else could it be but Niu Buchuan and Bao Fingyu? Needless to say, this old man had to be Grandmaster Xianlai. Grandmaster Ling agreed to compete with this old man. I am really flattered. Grandmaster Xianlai was very polite, far from being as arrogant as Niu Buchuan and Bao Fingyu. Obviously, he wasn't dazzled by the current glory, and knew that this world belonged to the strong after all. And in front of the supreme heavenly venerates, whatever celestial king or grandmaster of raw stones were nothing but trash. Now that he had shown the right attitude, the heavenly venerates would also remember his virtues, and perhaps might even let him keep his outstanding status. This was indeed what was called being seasoned and smooth. Ling Han chuckled. I've known about Grandmaster Xuanlai's reputation for a long time. Meeting with you today, you are indeed as extraordinary as your reputation. It wasn't that he deliberately flattered the other party. The grandmasters of raw stones who had risen at the beginning were indeed very good. He had heard of many cases. You're too kind with your words. Grandmaster Xianlai laughed. This time I invited Grandmaster Ling for stone gambling simply to compete in skills. There is no other meaning. Chapter 2861. 2,861 to wins in 3 rounds. Chapter 2861. 2,861 to wins in 3 rounds. 2,861 to wins in 3 rounds. Huh. Ling Han was a little surprised. Did this old man really just want to compete with him in skills? Grandmaster Xianlai turned his head and shouted to Bao Fingyu and Niu Buchuan behind him. Quickly apologize to Grandmaster Ling now. Although the duo of Bao and Niu were not very willing, they had no choice but to bow their heads. They knelt down and said, "We have previously offended Grandmaster Ling. We hope that Grandmaster Ling will be generous and forgive us this once." The two of them spoke in such an orderly manner that it was obvious that they had discussed it a long time ago, and it was definitely not a sudden decision made by Grandmaster Xianlai. Ling Han suddenly came to his senses. Just earlier, he had said that Grandmaster Xianlai was an enlightened character. This was precisely the wisdom of the other party. Even if he were to win against Ling Han, it wouldn't matter, as he wasn't able to kill Ling Han. One day, Grandmasters of Raw Stones would retire from the stage of history, and if Ling Han was to settle accounts at that time, then who would protect them in the future? Therefore, it would be better to take this opportunity to resolve any grievances. Offend a heavenly venerate? Wouldn't that be suicidal? Ling Han nodded. Since Grandmaster Xianlai saw it so clearly and gave him enough face, he would let the duo of Niu and Bao go, as long as these two refrained from any evil schemes in the future. Okay, I'll let it pass. Ling Han waved his hand. Both Bao and Niu were upset. In fact, Ling Han didn't suffer anything at all, so why were they required to bow their heads? But since their master had asked, how could they have the right to refuse? Grandmaster Xianlai, how are we going to compete? Ling Han asked. He completely didn't pay any heed to the duo of Niu and Bao, since Grandmaster Xianlai was the one to issue a challenge. He had naturally thought about it long ago. Therefore, after hearing such words, he smiled and said, "Then we will use 3 raw stones to determine the outcome." Agreed. Ling Han nodded. However, we won't be using the total value of the 3 raw stones to determine the outcome, but rather each raw stone will be counted as a single round. The victor will be the one who wins 2 out of 3 rounds. How about it? That's fine. In the first round, the selection of raw stones is limited to 2 hours, while in the second round, it is limited to 6 hours, and finally in the third round, it is limited to 1 day. Ling Han couldn't help but cast another glance at Grandmaster Xianlai. This old man was skilled indeed. In 2 hours, the number of raw stones that Ling Han could explore was quite limited, and it was impossible to even know what was in the raw stones selected by Grandmaster Xianlai, which made the game really suspenseful. Not only true ability was needed, but the result also depended on luck. Ling Han nodded. That's fine. He also found it boring to always win, without a doubt. Does Grandmaster Ling need to take a break, or should we start immediately? Grandmaster Xianlai asked with a smile. No need to waste time. Let's start, Ling Han said casually. Agreed. Master Xianlai invited the shopkeeper of Sever Void Lane over to act as the umpire of the competition. All around, there were countless people watching. This kind of stone gambling is quite novel. I have never seen it before. It's fair. Yes. No. Don't you think that Grandmaster Xianlai might have come here a long time ago, and perhaps had already explored all the raw stones here? If time is limited, it will be too unfavorable to Ling Han. Well, that's true also. Grandmaster Xianlai also listened to everyone's words, and he smiled. Since this old man have put forward so many restrictions, Grandmaster Ling can also make demands on this old man. Here, divide this place into 10 areas. Grandmaster Ling can limit the area where this old man chooses the raw stones, while Grandmaster Ling can choose any area at will. As soon as these words came out, everyone around had nothing further to say. There was no absolute fairness in this world. Grandmaster Xianlai has acted in a very transparent and righteous manner. Ling Han smiled and said, "Okay, let's do it like this." He randomly pointed to an area which would be Grandmaster Xuanlai's area, while he chose the adjacent area. "Are you both ready?" The shopkeeper of Severvoid Lane was a one-eyed man of broad build, a fourth-tier heavenly venerate named Fiery Silk. As a dignified fourth tier, couldn't he regrow his one eye? He obviously could, but didn't. There was a deep scar on his left eye, which was obviously intentional. Perhaps it was to remind himself whom he had lost it to back then, and if this shame could not be erased, then he would not heal the wound and regain sight in his left eye. Both Ling Han and Master Xianlai nodded. The Fiery Silk heavenly venerate through an hourglass, which floated in the sky, and sand began dripping. For the first round, it was only 2 hours. Ling Han didn't dare to waste time, and immediately started to move around. His current stone gambling ability has been greatly improved, and he could see the inside as long as he touched the raw stone with his hand. The speed was naturally astonishing, akin to observing the passing lights on a galloping horse, making swift judgment without stopping at all. Grandmaster Xianlai was the opposite. He would stand still and watch carefully, but once he cast a glance, he would have seen hundreds of raw stones with a single look, and he would leave after careful comparison. He was unexpectedly not much slower than Ling Han. But whether he truly saw through them, or he was just pretending, only he himself would know. Ling Han walked steadily, his face calm, but he was secretly surprised. As expected of the well-known Severvoid Lane indeed. The quality of the raw stones here was quite high. Almost 1 out of every 10 raw stones contained treasure, which was far from what the other raw stone lanes could compare to. But in fact, a large amount of treasure didn't mean that one could make money, because most of them were divine metal, and there was also a small amount of great herbs, but the quantity was extremely low, and Ling Han only saw 1 green-colored great herb. There wasn't anything else of higher grade than this. Was it because there were powerful characters overseeing this place that this had happened? If it was true, then such a grandmaster of raw stones ought not to be underestimated. Ling Han's footsteps were getting faster and faster. It was really difficult for him to sweep through this whole area in under 2 hours. After all, Severvoid Lane was jointly run by 6 major forces. So even though the area had been divided into 10 sections, it was still astonishingly massive. Everyone held their breath, and no one made a sound, not daring to disturb the 2 grandmasters of raw stone, or they would definitely be cast out. Yu Qingwang also came, and he sat down at one side with a haughty expression. He was also very curious about Ling Han's stone gambling ability, but it didn't matter whether Ling Han would win, or Lozé would never let Ling Han go. Who was he? The son of a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. There was absolutely no one who could refuse him. The great cloud's heavenly venerate also rushed over on purpose. There was another 4th tier beside him. He was Lung Dao, Lung Xiran's father, and kept staring at Ling Han with killing intent in his eyes. Both of them wanted to kill Ling Han, but one coveted the heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession, while the other wanted to avenge the murder of his son. The sand in the hourglass was getting less and less as the 2 hours was about to pass. "Stop!" the Fiery Silk heavenly venerate declared softly when all the sand had already emptied. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai stopped in their tracks at the same time and returned to their original places. "Both of you make your choice," Fiery Silk heavenly venerate said. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai nodded at the same time, stretched out their hands, and a raw stone flew over and fell into their hands respectively. "Are you two going to cut open the stone yourselves, or let the stonecutters in this lane open up the stone for you?" the Fiery Silk heavenly venerate inquired. "This old man will do it himself," Grandmaster Xianlai said. "I'll open it by myself too." "Understood." Fiery Silk heavenly venerate nodded. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai stepped forward to personally open up their raw stones. Immediately, everyone involuntarily took a few steps forward and began chatting excitedly. Now that the process of stone selection was over, they naturally were not afraid of disturbing these two people. Chapter 2862. 2862 A Draw. Chapter 2862. 2862 A Draw. 2862 A Draw. The raw stones chosen by Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai could be said to be very different. Ling Han's piece was the size of a man, while Grandmaster Xuanlai's one was only the size of a fist, not even 1% of Ling Han's piece. If the comparison is based on size, then Ling Han will sure win, someone joked. Shut up. He is a second-tier heavenly venerate with battle prowess that is comparable to that of a fourth tier. How can you joke about him? Someone immediately scolded him, lest he brought calamity upon himself. The man froze and didn't dare to speak any more. Everyone was looking forward to this. What kind of sparks would be produced in the fierce contest between these two people? As layers of stone scraps fall off, whether there was anything contained in the raw stone, and what it might be, would soon be revealed to the public. Gasp! As a heavenly venerate, Ling Han was naturally faster. Under his hands, the raw stone was already showing a hint of primal chaos, and a seal could be vaguely seen as churning. Heavenly Venerable Seal! Everyone exclaimed. How awesome! Obtaining a Heavenly Venerable Seal at the very start this already affirmed his invincible position. The fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate's eyes also lit up as he secretly thought that it would seem that some good things had leaked into the raw stone lane despite having been browsed by a Grandmaster of Raw Stone. Ling Han stopped his hand. He couldn't open it up any further, or the Heavenly Venerable Seal would come into being. On the other side, there's also treasure here. It's also a Heavenly Venerable Seal. The exclamation sounded again. Unexpectedly, Grandmaster Xianlai also unveiled a Heavenly Venerable Seal. As expected of a Grandmaster of Raw Stone. Amazing. But there were Heavenly Venerable Seals on both sides. How to judge this? Unless these two seals would be collected into one's mind, it would be impossible to compare which one was of a higher level. The problem was this was a Heavenly Venerable Seal, so even if it was given to someone, who would be willing to take it out again? Besides, if that person was to take out the more widely known 7 seals to deceive them, who would know? The first round was it considered a draw. Grandmaster Xianlai smiled. Although the Heavenly Venerable Seals cannot be analyzed, this old man here has a complete Heaven's Ring, which can be used for scanning to match the Heavenly Venerable Seal to the sequence, so that comparison can be made. Everyone looked at each other. Was there such a thing? You can try it. Grandmaster Xianlai took out a ring, which was engraved with seals, but it was by no means Heavenly Venerable Seals. Grandmaster Ling, please channel a Heavenly Venerable Seal and press this on it, he said to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, randomly channeled a 9th grade seal while holding the ring, and one of the nodes suddenly lit up. Grandmaster, Xianlai glanced at it. This is a 9th grade seal. He pointed out an area on the ring. Everything that lights up here is a 9th grade seal. Grandmaster Ling, you can try again. Ling Han once again channeled another 9th grade seal, and sure enough, it still lit up in the designated area. He was curious and said, what if it's a 7th grade seal? Here. Grandmaster Xianlai pointed to another area of the complete Heaven's Ring. Ling Han channeled an 8th grade seal, and the complete Heaven's Ring lit up again, and it was indeed not in the area of the 9th grade, nor in the area designated by Grandmaster Xianlai just earlier. This is an 8th grade seal, Grandmaster Xianlai said with a smile. Ling Han nodded. This can indeed reflect the level of the Heavenly Venerable Seals. Everyone was surprised. There was actually research that produced such a thing now. This is a recent invention, so it's no wonder that everyone doesn't know about it, Grandmaster Xianlai said. He first introduced which area corresponded to the symbol of the 9th grade seal, and then pressed the raw stone in his hand on the complete Heaven's Ring. Suddenly, the complete heavens ring lit up. A 7th grade seal, everyone said. Grandmaster Ling, you try it. Grandmaster Xianlai handed the complete heavens ring to Ling Han. Ling Han took it and pressed the raw stone on the complete heavens ring. The complete heavens ring also responded, and it lit up. It's also a 7th grade seal. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect that this still failed to distinguish who would be the winner. In the first round, it is a draw, the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate said. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai nodded, approving such judgment. Grandmaster Xianlai, do you still have many of such complete heavens ring? Someone asked Grandmaster Xianlai. Grandmaster Xianlai laughed loudly. Do you intend to use the complete heavens ring to select the raw stones which contain heavenly venerable seals? That is impossible, as the raw stone must be cut to the extent that only a trace of stone scrap remains and the heavenly venerable seal can be seen so that the complete heavens ring can sense it and map it accordingly. Hearing what he had said, everyone shook their head. They could already see it, so how could they cheat? However, this wasn't without its benefits. In the past, even if you saw someone else unearth a heavenly venerable seal, you could only take a gamble when rushing to procure it. Whether you might have bought a high-level or a low-level seal at a costly price would only be based on luck. But now, after mapping, one would be able to know which grade it belonged to, and even the specific sequence would be clear, so one would also be able to know whether one already owned this heavenly venerable seal. Ling Han also became very interested. He had to go get one so that he would know which seals in the sequence he was missing, and be able to connect the combination seals in a sequence. Grandmaster Ling, let's start the second round. Grandmaster Xianlai asked. All right. Ling Han nodded. It's still the same. You limit this old man to a specific area, but since it's a longer time limit this time, how about expanding it to 3 out of the 10 areas previously divided? Grandmaster Xianlai said with a smile. Ling Han agreed and randomly assigned 3 areas to Grandmaster Xianlai, while he also chose 3 areas. This time 6 hours, the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate said, and he threw out another hourglass. The two immediately began to choose. The first confrontation had allowed them to understand that the other party was a stubborn opponent and was not easy to deal with. Everyone held their breath once again. Such an even match was indeed exciting, which made them look forward to it even more. Soon, 6 hours had passed. Stop, the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate said. He further added, please select your own stone, respectively. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai fetched a stone each, but this time the stones that they had selected were about the same size. Both of them chose to cut open the stone by themselves. As the stone scraps continued to peel off, the contents inside also reappeared. Great herb. Both sides have unearthed a great herb. Ling Han's is yellow-colored. Grandmaster Xuanlai's is also yellow-colored. Hiss, is this another tie? See whether one side has properties of healing. Below the orange grade, the value of great herb that heals injuries is higher. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect these two people would both unearth a yellow-colored great herb at the same time. After the great herbs had been fully extracted, they were handed over to the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate, for evaluation. The fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate observed carefully for a while and said, they are both great herbs to improve one's cultivation level. He paused and emphasized invaluable. Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai took a closer look at the 2 great herbs, and they both nodded, agreeing with the conclusion of the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate that they were indeed great medicines for improving one's cultivation level. So, this second round came to a draw again. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that such a process would happen? What now? For the third round, this old man wants to enter the treasure area and then compete to see who is better, Grandmaster Xianlai suddenly said to the fiery silk, Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2863. 2863 Broken Saber. Chapter 2863. 2863 Broken Saber. 2863 Broken Saber. The fiery silk, heavenly venerate, hesitated. There were many raw stones considered to be of high value in the treasure area, but scrap stones might also be discovered at the same time. As a result, they had not been retained internally, but placed here as a signboard to attract customers. If these two people were to take off with high-level heavenly venerable seals or an orange-grade great herb, then Sever Void Lane would sustain a great loss. He thought about it and decided to agree nonetheless. This was an excellent opportunity to improve the store's reputation, and since they could only choose one raw stone each, then the loss would still be limited even if the treasure was harvested by them. Treasure area! Everyone was excited. The treasure area of Sever Void Lane had always been a reserved area, and people were rarely allowed to enter it. It was just that an orange-grade great herb had been harvested a very long time ago, and additionally a primitive beast had also been unearthed from here. It was extremely amazing. However, everyone wasn't allowed to enter the treasure area together. Only Ling Han, Grandmaster Xianlai, and the fiery silk heavenly venerate were allowed to enter, while the others could only watch from the outside. One day's time, the fiery silk heavenly venerate threw out the third hourglass. Neither Ling Han nor Grandmaster Xianlai wasted any time. They started immediately. As expected of Sever Void Lane, there were huge quantities of raw stones in this treasure area, arranged in a dazzling setup. Once one entered, one could feel a great aura, as if what was placed here wasn't stones, but rather time and age. Ling Han smiled. Although there was a huge quantity of raw stones here, there were only about 1,000 pieces. One day's time was enough for him to explore the area several times and choose the most valuable one among them. As he walked, he touched the stones one by one, but he was frowning slightly. In this majestic treasure area, there wasn't even a single heavenly venerable seal. Fuck. He stopped quickly and tapped lightly on a raw stone. There was a great herb in it, but it was only yellow-grade. He shook his head and moved on. After walking around a third of the area, he stopped again and found another great herb. Moreover, it was of the orange grade. The orange grade was a leap from the yellow grade. The yellow-colored great herb could only improve one's cultivation level or heal injuries, but the orange grade great herb could help a heavenly venerate cast away the shackles of his cultivation level and advance towards a new height of power. To put it simply, it could help a heavenly venerate sense new fundamental powers. Therefore, the orange great herb was more precious than the heavenly venerable seal. Of course, for a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the orange great herb wouldn't have any meaning at all. Ling Han didn't take the stone. If he subsequently found out that this was the most precious raw stone in the entire area, Grandmaster Xianlai wouldn't be able to snatch it from him anyway. Ling Han had the battle prowess of 4th tier, which was not something which a 9th heaven celestial king could contend with. After walking for a while, Ling Han stopped for the 3rd time and had a look of surprise on his face. It was because he discovered a saber in this particular raw stone. This was a broken saber, and yet it still made Ling Han feel a terrible and fierce aura despite being isolated within thick layers that could cut off even the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. Just a simple touch already caused him to have a headache. It was too scary. This was definitely a heavenly venerate tool, and had to have come from the hands of a high-level heavenly venerate to have such terrifying destructive power. Ling Han believed that the value of this broken saber should be higher than that of the orange grade great herb. This saber could only be refined by at least a 6th tier heavenly venerate, and it might even be a treasure of a 7th tier heavenly venerate, which was more amazing. He was sure that Sever Void Lane couldn't conclude the value of this raw stone, so it had been put here, otherwise they would definitely have opened it themselves. This saber had terrifying power. Ling Han still didn't take it and kept walking. This precious area was in the shape of a ring, so when Ling Han walked more than half of the place, he met Grandmaster Xianlai. Grandmaster Xianlai smiled politely at him and then passed him by. Ling Han also smiled slightly. He had a good impression of this old man. After walking for a while, Ling Han turned around and saw that Grandmaster Xianlai had already walked in front of the raw stone with the broken saber, and he kept looking at it with a puzzled look on his face, as if he didn't know whether to choose it or not. It seemed that the old man also felt something, but he didn't have the kind of see-through ability like Ling Han, so he seemed to be conflicted. Ling Han turned his head and continued to move forward. He found a few more great herbs one after another, and even discovered a heavenly venerable seal, which made him nod in approval. The reputation of the treasure area really didn't just come out of the air, and there were indeed precious treasures here. He was suddenly taken aback and stopped in his tracks. His hand was lying on a huge raw stone, and he could hardly believe his eyes. What he saw was completely beyond his expectation. This was too unbelievable, too amazing. Ling Han took a deep breath and walked past this raw stone. His heart was beating wildly. Should he choose this stone later? If he was to choose it, what he unveiled might be earth-shattering. But if he didn't choose it, was there any possibility for him to come here in the future? He also became conflicted and had the same feeling as Grandmaster Xianlai. There were really many good things here, and if he could only choose one, it wasn't enough. After going a full circle, Ling Han had already made up his mind. The time has come. The fiery silk, heavenly venerate, spoke up. In fact, both Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai had gone round once. To them, this treasure area was still a little small, and it wouldn't take a day's time to check out the whole place. Please. Both Ling Han and Grandmaster Xianlai made their moves, and things turned out as Ling Han had expected. The raw stone that Grandmaster Xianlai chose was the one with the broken saber, while Ling Han chose the huge raw stone that had shocked him. Grandmaster Xianlai, you go first, Ling Han said. Grandmaster Xianlai did not decline, and immediately started to cut open the raw stone. After a while, boom, a murderous aura rushed towards his face. To say nothing of a ninth heaven celestial king, even the fourth tier heavenly venerate turned pale and had an indescribable heart palpitation. The celestial tool in Grandmaster Xianlai's hand immediately fell to the ground, and his entire being also sat down on the ground, paralyzed, with cold sweat flowing down from him like a stream. Is there any peerless monster about to be born? I am a second tier heavenly venerate, but why do I still have a feeling of fear? Everyone exclaimed. What exactly came out of this? Let me do it. The fiery silk heavenly venerate walked up. Obviously, Grandmaster Xianlai was no longer able to cut open the stone. Even if he was allowed to stay there, his body might be torn to pieces by the murderous aura. One ought to know that its contents had not been truly unearthed yet. Everyone gathered together and could only vaguely see something. This looks like a saber. Furthermore, it's a broken saber, and the breaking point is here. It is still covered by a layer of stone scrap, and the murderous aura is already so terrifying. Heavens, what is this? The fiery silk heavenly venerate's hands also trembled a little. So what if he was a fourth tier? The murderous aura of this broken saber was too strong indeed, and he couldn't control himself. But a fourth tier was a fourth tier after all. He forcibly suppressed the palpitations in his heart and gave it a slap. Now that it was known that a saber was hidden in it, with a murderous aura so terrifying, its grade obviously had to be far above a celestial tool, so there was no need to worry about it being smashed by the power of a heavenly venerate. The stone shattered, and a broken saber immediately appeared in front of everyone. The whole body of this saber was pitch black, and it looked like 1/3 of it was broken. If one was to look carefully, this saber wasn't naturally black, but it had been stained with too much blood, which made it appear black. Pah! As soon as the broken saber came out, at least 90% of the people went weak and collapsed onto the ground. Even the heavenly venerates were no exception. Only the fourth tier was able to stand upright, but his legs were shaking. Chapter 2864. 2864 7th tier? Chapter 2864. 2864 7th tier. 2864 7th tier. This saber was very terrifying. To be able to advance to the position of a heavenly venerate was to be a prodigy among prodigies, standing at the pinnacle of the world. But a mere broken saber could actually render those heavenly venerates with cultivation level below the fourth tier unable to stand upright. Just what kind of concept was this? Incomparable. The fiery silk, heavenly venerate side. According to my deductions, this should be the weapon of at least a sixth tier heavenly venerate, and having consumed the blood of countless heavenly venerates, it therefore possesses such a terrifying, murderous aura. Everyone nodded. Once the saber was drawn, heavenly venerates below the cultivation level of fourth tier couldn't even stand steady. How would they be able to fight? The question was, who below the fourth tier would be able to use this saber? This wasn't a confrontation with the enemy yet, but he himself was already weak in the knees and fell to the ground. Wasn't this courting death? Unless this saber takes the initiative to recognize an owner, it won't work even if a fourth tier is to wield it, a fourth tier heavenly venerate said. But his eyes were still burning. If he could solve the shortcoming of hurting oneself, this broken saber could really be of great use. The eyes of Lung Dao and the great cloud's heavenly venerate eyes also lit up the saber was unearthed by Grandmaster Xianlai, so they could just ask the other party for it, and having a fourth tier open his mouth to request. Even if it was a Grandmaster of Raw Stone, would he dare to refuse? Ling Han, do you want to continue the competition? The fiery silk heavenly venerate asked Ling Han. It seemed that there was no suspense anymore. A broken saber even suppressed the fourth tier heavenly venerate, which even a heavenly venerable seal could not compare with by far. Ling Han smiled faintly. Of course. It wasn't that he didn't know the horror of this broken saber. In fact, Grandmaster Xianlai could at most guess that the thing hidden in this raw stone might be shocking, but he absolutely didn't know what it was. But Ling Han clearly knew it, but still didn't choose the raw stone. What did this mean? Ling Han began to cut into his stone carefully, as if there was a heavenly venerable seal hidden in it. Every person present shook their head, this time let alone a heavenly venerable seal. Even an orange-colored great herb would be useless, as it couldn't be compared to this broken saber. But Ling Han was not only extremely slow, but he actually cut a huge raw stone into a human shape. Everyone couldn't help bearing weird expressions. Did he think that a person would really pop out of it if he was to cut it into a human shape? Ling Han's hands were trembling a little. Others didn't feel it at all, but he was under a lot of pressure. He didn't dare to make a wrong cut, otherwise he might suffer a violent backlash if he touched the thing inside, and he might even be killed from the shock wave. Therefore, he had to scan with his divine sense to clearly understand the situation inside. But when his divine sense encountered that thing, he was under tremendous pressure. Even though he possessed the battle prowess of a fourth tier, it was still quite unbearable for him. His hands became slower and slower, and layers of sweat fell from his forehead. Some people lost their patience, thinking that Ling Han was deliberately delaying because he had definitely lost. Can it be opened or not? It's pointless to delay it like this. Why don't you just admit defeat? That's right, this time it's just a competition, and there's no disadvantage to you, even if you lose. However, fourth-tier elites, such as the fiery silk, heavenly venerate, looked solemn. As the stone scraps became thinner and thinner, their strong divine sense could already feel an indescribable aura surging. This caused their hearts to tremble, even almost tearing them apart. What terrible thing was hidden inside? "Shut up!" The fiery silk heavenly venerate shouted sharply, and immediately everyone dared not speak any more. Ling Han took a deep breath. Schwa, schwa, schwa. He made 17 consecutive slashes with his blade. Immediately, the thing in that raw stone was finally revealed. Hiss! Everyone was numb with shock as an indescribably turbulent wave surged. Within this raw stone there really was a person. This was definitely not a living person, but a corpse without the slightest breath of life. But it was precisely such a corpse that had caused heavenly venerates to become breathless, as if they had all become mortals facing an ultimate god. It was no wonder that Ling Han had to carefully cut it even with his strength. If it had been another person, it would have been impossible to unearth this corpse. At most they would reveal a hand, a foot, or something like that. Everyone retreated to the extreme, and then looked at it carefully. This was a man who looked to be in his 30s, with a square face filled with dominance, and he was indeed wearing a black dragon robe and a black flat crown on his head, giving him the appearance of an emperor. Could it be that this is the corpse of a 7th-tier elite? Someone said in a trembling voice. It was too terrifying indeed. Even though it was just a corpse, the surrounding layers of space were shrinking and collapsing, as they couldn't bear its power at all, while the heaven and earth were getting even paler, and even though it was in the void, there were still dense thunder clouds and lightning rolling, and yet they didn't descend. Could it be that the heavens was also afraid? 7th-tier elite, even the heaven and earth would not dare to send down thunder as punishment. Impossible! Someone suddenly exclaimed loudly. Although the voice was not high, it was filled with a mighty aura. Who are you? What do you know? Someone beside him couldn't help scolding the person. But more people actually revealed shocked expressions and bowed to this person. Even the 4th-tier heavenly venerates were no exception. Young Master Xian, Lord Xian, Friend Xian. This was a magnificent young man with thick black hair and bright eyes, with a majestic aura that seemed to shake the world. Xian Chihu, the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Finally someone spoke his name. Hiss! Those who didn't yet know the identity of this person were gasping for air. Who in this world was known to everyone? That would definitely not be the few 7th-tier heavenly venerates, but rather Xian Chihu, Lin Yulian, and Wu Haoyang, the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity. These 3 people were destined to become 6th tiers and possibly even advance to the 7th tier. They were known as the greatest prodigies of all eternity, and without a doubt they were well deserving of such reputation. Xian Chihu strode over, and everyone couldn't help but retreat, clearing the way for him. Although he was a 4th tier, his battle prowess was at least at the 5th tier and might be even a little bit stronger. Perhaps he alone could obliterate the entire culmination city. Greetings, Lord Xian. More people fell to the ground, bowing their heads to the greatest prodigy of all eternity. It was really unexpected that Xian Chihu would be attracted by this stone gambling contest. Xian Chihu strode forwards, and he had already come to the ancient corpse. Others dared not go within a distance of 30 meters, but he stood at a distance of 9 meters, exhibiting his terrifying strength. My father said that the 7th-tier heavenly venerates hold the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world, transcending everything else, and are immortal. He stared at the ancient corpse as he said so. Xian Chihu's father, Xian Fu, was a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, the strongest of all time under heaven and earth. That's right, my father said the same thing. A rumbling voice sounded, as if there were countless real dragons roaring, while a young man also strode over. Wu Haoyang, someone whispered. Hiss! Here came another greatest prodigy of all eternity. If the other, Lin Yulian, was to come, then together with Ling Han, the current 4 great prodigies would have all gathered together. The 7th tier is immortal and cannot be eradicated. He can only be suppressed and not killed. Wu Haoyang walked over, only 9 meters away from the ancient corpse, and said if it weren't for this, hysteria would have already attacked. A seventh tier couldn't die, but currently the heavenly venerate in black dragon robes was already dead, which could only mean that this person wasn't a seventh tier heavenly venerate. Weird. Xian Chihu suddenly frowned. Weird indeed. A beautiful voice sounded, and a stunning woman walked over elegantly, and similarly stood at the same place 9 meters away from the ancient corpse. Lin Yulian. Chapter 2865. 2865 contend. Chapter 2865. 2865 contend. 2865 contend. Everyone was astounded. The 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity had actually appeared in Culmination City, and they had all moved for the sake of this ancient corpse appearing at the same time. It was proof enough to show just how astonishing this ancient corpse was. You can already see what's strange about this. Xian Chihu looked towards Lin Yulian. There was no one worthy of his notice. Aside from Lin Yulian, the only person that he would barely consider a rival was Wu Haoyang, and as for others, even 4th tiers were trash to him. Lin Yulian nodded. Theoretically, a 7th tier would not die or be destroyed, but the feeling this ancient corpse gives me is no different than how my father feels. That is indeed so. Wu Haoyang nodded as well. This man was definitely a 7th tier when he was alive, and even after death, he still has such tremendously terrifying pressure. I can guarantee that even if a 6th tier touches his body, their arm will be severed at the very least. However, how could this be possible? Xian Chihu frowned. It was also he who had previously said that this definitely could not be the corpse of a 7th tier, because a 7th tier could not possibly die. This was a contradiction. However, no matter how they looked at it, this ancient corpse should indeed be a 7th tier. This was truly baffling. Moreover, Lin Yulian paused slightly and then continued. There has never been news of a 7th tier heavenly venerate dying in all of history. If this was a 7th tier heavenly venerate, then what primitive era would he have to have existed in? This person's history may be countless times further and more extensive than we could possibly imagine, Wu Haoyang agreed. As these 3 people conversed, there was not one among the bystanders that had the right to interrupt. Even those 4th tier heavenly venerates could only listen at the side. They were the 3 greatest prodigies of all eternity, and their battle prowess was at least at the 5th tier. This matter is too serious. We might have to ask the elders to come and take a look for themselves, Xian Chiu said. Lin Yulian nodded, and then turned to look towards Ling Han. Brother Ling, could you hand this ancient corpse over to us? Ling Han did not mind. Even he could not approach this ancient corpse. It would definitely blow up his body. He gave a gesture of invitation and said, Please go ahead. Xian Chihu looked towards Ling Han and asked, So you are Ling Han? Ling Han merely smiled slightly. He did not know what Xian Chihu's attitude towards him was, so there was no rush to show anything either. Not bad, not bad. I think that you should spend some more effort on stone gambling, Xian Chihu said. I heard that Grandmasters of Raw Stone also have the ability of finding veins of, or, so would you like to come and give me a hand? He was saying this with a smile, and looked like he was joking, but if the other party wanted to take it seriously, then it seemed like he was being serious as well. Ling Han looked at Xian Chihu, also smiling, and asked, Do you want to learn? I can take you as my disciple. This, he had been counterchecked. It seemed like Ling Han, too, was joking. But if Xian Chihu wanted to take him seriously, the former's words could also be taken seriously. They implied, You want to take me in as your lackey? I will directly become your master and be your senior. Xian Chihu faltered slightly. He had not expected that Ling Han would really dare to say this, daring to fire a retort back at him, the greatest prodigy of all eternity. But if he really wanted to flip out, there did not seem like there was anyone that could be his target. It was he who had first spoken, half-jokingly. How could it be that Ling Han could not respond with a joke himself then? "I will remember you." Xian Chihu smiled, his eyes bright, exuding a frightening pressure. Ling Han was not the type that was willing to be bullied. He was just about to retort, but Lin Yolian stretched out a hand in front of him, stopping the words he was just about to say. This exquisite beauty said, "Brother X and Brother Wu, we should quickly get going and pay a visit to the realm battlefield." "All right." Xian Chihu nodded. He knew that Lin Yulian was deliberately trying to play mediator here. He could refuse to give face to others, but when it came to Lin Yulian, he definitely had to give her some face. Wu Haoyang glanced longer at Ling Han and said, "Ling Han, your progress is too slow. How can you be worthy of fighting me like this? I have only lost to you alone in a battle of equal cultivation level. I definitely do not permit myself to eternally bear this kind of humiliation." He was no despicable character, and was very broad-minded, relating this part of his history in full public. What, Wu Haoyang has lost to Ling Han in the past? This is too inconceivable. He is the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, Wu Haoyang actually lost. However, Wu Haoyang is presently in the 4th tier, but Ling Han is only in the 2nd tier. This is enough to show the difference. That's true. A moment of strength does not mean eternal strength. He is already no longer worthy of being considered Wu Haoyang's equal. Wu Haoyang is truly broad-minded, not caring in the slightest to speak of how he has previously lost in public. He has truly lived up to his name of being the greatest prodigy of all eternity. Everyone was conversing spiritedly, all of them praising Wu Haoyang. Ling Han was unconcerned and said calmly, "You can suppress your cultivation level, and we can have another battle of equal cultivation level. Maybe some other day," Wu Haoyang said smilingly. He pointed at that ancient corpse. "I don't have the time now." Ling Han nodded and replied, "All right." In a battle of equal cultivation level, whom would he have to fear? He could thrash even a 7th tier, Heavenly Venerate. Even if Lin Yulian and the others had extremely astonishing strength, they still had to carefully take out a layer of stones, which they heaped on this ancient corpse. After piling layer upon layer, that terrifying pressure gradually lessened at last. But the layers of stone could not compare with actual raw stone. Hence, in the end, the 3 of them heaved the ancient corpse, which was looking like a small hill, and left. Even so, there was still astonishing pressure seeping out of the corpse shroud, causing everyone they passed to involuntarily sprawl out on the ground. Not until Lin Yulian and the others finally vanished from sight did everyone finally sigh in relief. This corpse was really too terrifying. Grandmaster Ling, this old man admits defeat. Grandmaster Xianlai smiled. With a toss, he threw out 2 things, and they were both wrapped in a layer of stone. Ling Han knew that this was the heavenly venerable seal and great herb that he had previously unearthed. He was slightly surprised. Previously, they had made no agreement that the winner would take all. Grandmaster Xianlai was deliberately showing him a gesture of goodwill. Upon further thought, Grandmaster Xianlai was actually just a celestial king, so what use would he have for this great herb or heavenly venerable seal? In any case, he would have to give them over to some heavenly venerate, so why couldn't he just pass them on to Ling Han? It should be known that Ling Han had boundless potential, and his future accomplishments were immeasurable. Ling Han nodded at Grandmaster Xianlai and smiled, indicating that he accepted his kindness. "Please also deal with this broken saber on my behalf, Grandmaster Ling." Grandmaster Xianlai stayed benevolent until the end, and gifted that broken saber to Ling Han as well. In any case, he couldn't even draw near to it. "Grandmaster Xianlai, this is a supreme treasure. Don't you think that is too rash?" The great cloud's heavenly venerate immediately said, "That's right, this is a rare supreme treasure, so it would be better to deal with it after much serious consideration first. Lung Dao said as well. Grandmaster Xianlai was incredibly slick and smooth. How could he possibly make enemies of any heavenly venerate? He hurriedly smiled and said, "My lords, your words have come a little too late. This old man has already gifted the broken saber to Grandmaster Ling. If you desire it, please seek Grandmaster Ling. It is no longer any business of this old man. Fengyu, Buchuan, we should leave." The old geezer really left, without even turning back, as if there were flames licking at his heels. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This old geezer was actually quite interesting. "Ling Han, this broken saber was unearthed at our lane. Give me some face, and we will buy it from you, all right?" The fiery silk, heavenly venerate, said to Ling Han. It was extremely possible that this broken saber was the precious tool of a 7th tier, heavenly venerate, and this had boundless significance. Chapter 2866, 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. Chapter 2866, 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. 2866, I'm not giving anyone face. Ling Han, it would be better to pass it to me. The great clouds, heavenly venerate, spoke up as well. In return, I will allow you to choose any 10 raw stones in our raw stone lane as compensation. Hearing these words, everyone couldn't help but scoff secretly. So stingy. Could the value of 10 raw stones compare to the value of this broken saber? He was completely just planning to gain something without risking anything of his own. Ling Han rolled his eyes at him. He had already made a clean sweep of that raw stone lane long ago. To say nothing of 10 pieces, even 100 or 1,000 raw stones would not be able to reveal anything valuable. You can just keep on dreaming. Ling Han, you should consider carefully, Lung Dao also advised, his words filled with threat. Ling Han glanced at him. I hate you too. If either of you speak any further, I will definitely kill him. Would you believe me? The great clouds heavenly venerate and Lung Dao instinctively wanted to say no. But when they spotted the killing intent that was hidden under Ling Han's calm features, they swallowed the words that were just at the tip of their tongue. They both humphed. What meaning was there for dignified, heavenly venerates to just argue verbally? When Ling Han exited the city, they could just kill and rob him. The reason why the great clouds heavenly venerate had previously not moved was because he felt that he alone was not enough of a guarantee to kill Ling Han. So he wanted to wait for Lung Dao to arrive. Ling Han glanced at the fiery silk heavenly venerate again. The latter had been quite polite, so he smiled slightly. Apologies, I myself am also quite interested in this saber. The fiery silk heavenly venerate's gaze flickered. Since he was able to become the shopkeeper of Severvoid Lane and oversee this place, his strength definitely surpassed the average of 4th tier. However, should he move now and suppress Ling Han? He was wary. Firstly, this was in full public, and if he made a move to snatch the item forcefully, the matter of Severvoid Lane bullying their customers would spread out. In the future, who would still come to choose raw stones here? Wouldn't they be afraid that if they unearthed anything valuable, it would be forcefully snatched from them as well? By then, with several dozen 6th tier heavenly venerates simultaneously interrogating him, how was he supposed to explain? Secondly, Ling Han was not an ordinary 2nd tier. His battle prowess was comparable to a 4th tier's. If they fought, it would definitely cause tremendous damage to Culmination City, and the fiery silk would not be able to bear the consequences for such actions, either. Hence, after further consideration, he nodded slowly. In that case, friend Ling has to be careful. These words seemed both like a threat and a reminder, because it was not just he alone who had designs on that broken saber. Furthermore, there were at least 2 heavenly venerable seals in Ling Han's possession as well, and he had even more great herbs. Who did not want to obtain them? Ling Han merely smiled, then turned and left. Wait! A voice suddenly rang out, appearing very abrupt. Everyone looked over and couldn't help but feel surprise because the speaker was actually a celestial king. A mere celestial king actually dared to speak up in these circumstances had his head been kicked silly by a donkey. Yet this celestial king's expression was filled with arrogance as he declared, "My young master has said that he wants this broken saber. No one is to touch it. Otherwise, when my young master returns, whoever has taken this saber, my young master will seek them out and demand it from them." Hiss! What bold words! Who is your young master, then? Even those aggressive people like Yu Qingwang felt an uncontrollable urge to beat someone up. Fuck, the Celestial King was actually even more arrogant than him? Was he trying to steal his limelight here? "My young master," that Celestial King said slowly, extremely calm and steady, "is Xan Chihu, Lord Xan." When these words fell, a dead silence fell over the area. Who was Xan Chihu? He was the greatest prodigy of all eternity, and though he had been stuck in the 4th tier for many years already, it was certain that his battle prowess had to be at the 5th tier at least. Furthermore, his old man was a 7th tier heavenly venerate, an indestructible, immortal, terrifying existence. Even if his old man was set aside, and it was him alone, how many people in this world could afford to offend him? Thus, when Xan Chihu's name was heard, everyone fell silent, and even Yu Qingwang gave up his intentions to compete. It could not be helped. He really could not compete. That Celestial King's expression was filled with pride. His master had that kind of intimidation. He had already witnessed this kind of scene a considerable number of times, and who would dare to disobey his command? Ling Han moved and piled those layers of stone on the broken saber. Otherwise, even he would have to suffer some effects. And this could not be used to intimidate an opponent at all, because once the saber was exposed and he was the nearest, the effects on him naturally would be the most severe. Very good, you are very proactive. When the Celestial King saw how Ling Han had taken the initiative to wrap the broken saber, he couldn't help but nod, a smile appearing on his face. The action of commanding a heavenly venerate made him feel an indescribable feeling of superiority. He did not need to become a heavenly venerate himself, but could still command a heavenly venerate. This was too fun. Very soon, Ling Han had concealed the broken saber completely, wrapping a thick layer of stone around it. Then he picked it up. He attempted to stow it away into his spatial tool, but before he had managed to stow it in, it had already destroyed the spatial tool. He shook his head. From the look of things, the only thing he could do was hold it. "Bring it over here, quickly!" the Celestial King harshly shouted when he saw how Ling Han was moving slowly. Ling Han glanced at him and strode over. When everyone saw this, they all shook their head. Sigh! Even someone as strong as Ling Han had to bow his head in submission. Xan Chihu was too powerful. With this kind of authority, TSK, even just his subordinate, could be so domineering and overbearing. Seeing Ling Han approach, that Celestial King couldn't help but reveal a proud grin. Heavenly Venerate? Tui! Ling Han had already drawn near, and that Celestial King very naturally extended his hand, wanting to take the broken saber from him. Pa! Ling Han moved and delivered a slap right at him. That Celestial King's eyes immediately bulged. He had never imagined that Ling Han would, and actually dared to, make a move on him. But how could he possibly be capable of sustaining the blow of a heavenly venerate? He did not even manage to counter, and he had already been blown up, turning into a fountain of blood. Ling Han very carelessly flicked his hand, as if he was swiping off some dirt that was on his hand. Quite a number of people were gaping, appearing extremely shocked. That was Xan Chihu's servant, though his individual strength was not even worth mentioning. Killing him was in fact equivalent to slapping Xan Chihu. This would become a huge problem. But there were also a number of people who were pleased. A mere Celestial King actually dared to order around a heavenly venerate. This was a reasonable kill. Ling Han turned and left. Since he had killed the Celestial King, that was it. Was there any need to take it to heart? As for Xianqihu, sooner or later, he would battle the latter. Everyone saw him off. Some looked impressed and admiring, while some sneered, delighting in his misfortune. There were some that had soaring killing intent, and were waiting for a chance to make a move. Ling Han, Ling Shi, and Fu Tianqing went to find Hu Niu and the Empress, and they decided to return to base after reuniting with them. They had already stayed here for more than 900 years, and had already unearthed more or less all the valuable raw stones here. Furthermore, after this competition, Ling Han was probably going to become the least welcomed customer of every raw stone lane here. It was already impossible for him to want to get rich secretly. Hence, there was not much meaning left in continuing to stay here. Moreover, Ling Han also wanted Zhou Heng and the others to help him take a look at this broken saber to see if they could think of some way to make it so that it would not have any effect on the user. If that was possible, the significance of the saber would be much greater. They set out, exiting Culmination City, and turned back around to head to base. But clearly, it would not be so easy for them to leave. Not long after exiting the city, they spotted a man that was sitting in the distance. There weren't any plants here, so there was nothing keeping the soil rooted. Dirt and sand fluttered in the air, seemingly like a desert. In this kind of place, there was a chair. Aside from deliberately posturing, what other significance would there be? This show-off was Yu Qingwang. "Ling Han, do you think you can leave so easily without my permission?" he said in a disdainful tone. Chapter 2867. 2867 Weakest Link. Chapter 2867. 2867 Weakest Link. 2867 Weakest Link. Ling Han glanced at him. "Where are your lackeys? Let them come out." "Ling Han!" someone shouted immediately, and walked out from the surging yellow sand. It was the Purple Flames, Heavenly Venerate. He was just a member of the Yu clan's alliance, an alliance and not anyone's subordinate. He was a dignified Heavenly Venerate and a fourth tier, cultivator at that. How could he possibly be under someone else's command? The reason why he would take action under Yu Qingwang's instigation was naturally the treasures in Ling Han's possession. That broken saber, the peerless great herbs, and the heavenly venerable seals were all too attractive. Out of the mouth comes misfortune. This is an old saying, and it contains the truth. But there are people who haven't suffered enough. The Four Sides Heavenly Venerate also came out of the yellow sand, and his face was now filled with bitterness and sorrow. "There is nothing left to be said. Kill him." The highest North Heavenly Venerate also appeared and stood behind Ling Han to prevent him from escaping. When he went to see Ling Han that day, his face was full of amiability, which made people feel that he was very easy to get along with. But now his face was filled with killing intent, which made people shudder. The Six Heavens Heavenly Venerate and Gray Space Heavenly Venerate also appeared on the left and right, respectively, similarly full of killing intent. In this instant, 5 fourth-tier Heavenly Venerates had actually joined forces to surround and attack Ling Han. Ling Han remained unfazed, turned his head, and said, "All of you go into hiding first. I'll get rid of the trash first." The Empress and the others nodded, and entered the celestial guest residence, one after another. "Such an arrogant tone," said the Four Sides Heavenly Venerate, his face filled with anger, and it was obvious that he had switched expressions. "No matter how freakish you are, you're merely a second tier," the highest North Heavenly Venerate said disdainfully. "My lords, please act together to suppress this brat," Yu Qingwang urged. Although he was the son of a sixth tier, he had to maintain absolute respect when facing fourth tiers. At the level of Heavenly Venerable tier, the hierarchy of the levels became even stricter. "All right, we can avoid future troubles." The Gray Space Heavenly Venerate nodded and took the initiative to attack. As he made the move, the other Heavenly Venerates moved as well. The 5 great elites launched attacks together towards Ling Han to suppress him. Boom! The attacks of the 4th tiers were too terrifying. The space here was already unstable, and the earth immediately crumbled, creating an extremely frightening scene, as if the entire dimension was about to collapse. If these attacks took place in the Flaming Frost realm, it would be absolutely impossible to cause such an effect, as the power of the heaven and earth would balance and suppress it in order to maintain the stability of the dimension. However, this dimension was already dead. Rather than calling it a dimension, it would be more accurate to describe it as a huge piece of barren land that couldn't breed any vitality, because this dimension itself was dead and absolutely devoid of vitality to begin with. The destructive power of a heavenly venerate could be infinitely magnified here, and the horror of it was indescribable. Ling Han humphed coldly. "You're seeking death." His body moved and appeared in front of the highest north heavenly venerate, throwing out a punch. "You're overestimating your abilities." The highest north heavenly venerate sneered, maintaining his original attack. Pung! The highest north heavenly venerate was immediately sent flying. He was actually no match for Ling Han at all. Ling Han charged forward through this gap and chased after the highest north heavenly venerate, barraging him violently. Pung, pung, pung. His punches became faster and faster. The infinite power of dimension burst forth from within his body, and densely packed seals flickered on his skull, interweaving together into one piece. As he struck with the fists of fury, he unleashed his full battle prowess. This time, Ling Han was channeling the 9th grade combination seals, which boosted his power by 44 times, causing his battle prowess to be extremely terrifying. Not good. The highest north heavenly venerate couldn't help being shocked. Although Ling Han was only channeling 9th grade seals, which he himself had mastered a few of, the boost in power the latter enjoyed was only 4 or 5 times. But the effect was completely different when it was channeled in Ling Han's hands. "Combination seals!" the highest north exclaimed. Dozens of 9th grade seals were superimposed together, and their effect would reach the level of 5th grade, surpassing any high-level seals that he had mastered. The highest north heavenly venerate tried his best to block the attacks, but he was no match for Ling Han's power at all. He was being knocked back again and again. The highest north retreated, but Ling Han chased him down and kept attacking, while the gray space heavenly venerate and the other great elites were several positions behind, and were actually unable to catch up no matter what. This was too appalling. It was clearly the 5 great elites that had besieged Ling Han alone, but now the situation was forcibly turned into a one-on-one battle. And the result of a one-on-one battle was that the highest north heavenly venerate was outmatched. The gray space heavenly venerate and the other 3 were both anxious and shocked. If Ling Han was to finish off the highest north heavenly venerate first, that would be equivalent to breaking one of their links, and it also meant that Ling Han could still crush them one by one. Therefore, they had to stop Ling Han. Otherwise, it would deal a devastating blow to their confidence. The highest north heavenly venerate naturally knew this too, and he was being drawn into the eye of the storm, which left him no room for retreat, so he could only grit his teeth and persevere. Pung! 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 However, Ling Han's explosive power was too terrifying. Ling Han's strength wasn't inferior to the highest north's to begin with, and now, with a strength boost of 44 times, in addition to the power of the heavenly venerate technique that he had cultivated, the power of his strikes really caused his opponent to complain unceasingly. How could a mere 2nd tier be strong to this extent? Blood flowed from the corner of the highest north's mouth, but he forcibly suppressed it, and didn't spit it out directly from his throat. Further, his complexion was even more hilarious. It was red at one instance, and then white in the next instance, being even more changeable than that of the 4 sides heavenly venerate. Crack! 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 The violent sound of bones breaking could be heard continuously. Despite the highest north heavenly venerate's body being tempered by the fundamental power, under such a fierce attack there was still breakage. He hastily took out a cyan great herb, and just bit off a leaf and consumed it without even looking at it. In the midst of a fierce battle, there was no time for the highest north heavenly venerate to recover slowly, and he could only consume a precious leaf of a great herb. The effect was obvious. His heavenly venerate bones were healing, and even showing signs of becoming stronger within a short period of time. This was just the healing of a cyan great herb. If it had been green or yellow, it would definitely have been even more impressive and awesome. "How dare you eat my precious medicine? Spit it out!" Ling Han was furious, and he struck with fists of fury even more rapidly. The highest north heavenly venerate was taken aback for a moment. "What has my consumption of my own great herb anything to do with you?" However, he suddenly realized that Ling Han already regarded him as a dead person, so everything on him naturally became Ling Han's. Thinking that way, wasn't he just consuming Ling Han's great herb? Damn, Ling Han was too hateful. The highest north heavenly venerate screamed. Ever since he had become a heavenly venerate, he had never lost his composure like this, but now he was being infuriated to the extreme by Ling Han, and yet he could only keep retreating despite being furious. Oh, how much he wanted to reunite with the gray space heavenly venerate and the others so they could combine the power of 5 people to suppress Ling Han. However, Ling Han didn't give the highest north this chance at all, simply targeting him and fiercely beating him up, so much so that he could only be continuously sent flying. While the gray space heavenly venerate and the others were not far away, the distance remained fixed, and they were unable to get any closer. The highest north heavenly venerate also became ruthless. If worst came to worst, he would just consume all of this great herb, and he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to survive Ling Han's burst of power. The heavenly venerable seals could only release energy for a maximum of 2 hours, regardless of whether it was a single seal or combination seals. At that time, to say nothing of the joint forces of the gray space heavenly venerate and the others, even the highest north heavenly venerate himself wouldn't need to be afraid of Ling Han. It was just that Ling Han's punches were too overbearing. After a while, the highest north heavenly venerate had to bite off another leaf and consume it. The bones in his arm had already been severely broken, so he had no choice but to take the medicine. Ling Han burst into anger, while his fist struck with greater and greater speed. The highest north heavenly venerate could only keep on taking medicine as he had to survive this most dangerous period. Chapter 2868. 2868, Killing Them All. Chapter 2868. 2868, Killing Them All. 2868, Killing Them All. The highest north heavenly venerate was running out of great herbs. There were only 7 leaves on this great herb, and he had finished every one of them. He had to resort to eating the stem now. Even though the effectiveness was not any weaker compared to the leaves, he could only get 7 to 8 bites of it. A sense of doubt rose in the highest north heavenly venerate's mind. Could he endure until the end of Ling Han's power burst? He definitely could. He pushed the negative emotions to the back of his mind as quickly as they came up. How could one who could become a heavenly venerate not have this much toughness? With the exception of a never-before-seen prodigy like Xian Chihu, everyone had to encounter tons of setbacks and pitfalls on their path to becoming a heavenly venerate. If he hadn't had at least this much tenacity, he would have long perished on his journey to becoming a heavenly venerate. He tried his best to hold on, relentlessly swallowing the great herb while calculating the time. 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. He revealed an expression of joy. He could still barely use the great herb in his hand one more time, while Ling Han's burst of power had ended. Ha ha ha, brat, it's your turn to suffer. The purple flames, heavenly venerate, also displayed a cold smile filled with killing intent. Ling Han was already at his limit. This time, it was their turn to beat the SHT out of this brat. Ling Han did not falter. Boom! An even more shocking power erupted from his body, raising his battle prowess by yet another level. What? Another combination seal. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was shocked. Ling Han's skull, pelvis, arms, and legs were shining with the light of a seal. This was definitely another combination seal. This time, the highest North had the urge to vomit blood, literally. A sense of despair crept up inside him. Heavenly Venerable seals were rare beyond compare. Barring the 7 more widely known seals, trying to obtain even one of them was incredibly difficult. And if even getting one of them was this hard, what more of obtaining such a combination seal? However, not only did Ling Han have combination seals, he also had more than one set. Knowing this, how could the highest North Heavenly Venerable not want to vomit blood? How could he not despair? How could he possibly hold on? The highest North Heavenly Venerate was a tough man, but the great herb in his hands was completely spent. It was impossible to make bricks without straws. How was he supposed to endure any longer? He took his final portion of the great herb, and then roared as he launched a desperate attack. As a 4th tier Heavenly Venerate, he was not short of decisiveness. Since there was no path to retreat, he had to kill his way out. He aggressively pressed forward, turning defense into offense. Only by pushing Ling Han back, or at the very least making him ease up on his attacks, would he have the chance to regroup with the gray space, Heavenly Venerate, and the rest. For the sake of survival, he gave it his all. Ling Han had a calm look on his face. Why would he give the tiger a chance to return to the mountains? Kill! He continued with his fierce onslaught. Using the astonishing power of the 4 direction seals, he sent the highest North Heavenly Venerate flying into the distance with a single punch, not showing any signs of stopping at all. Pum! 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 The highest North Heavenly Venerate was truly in despair. He could feel the organs inside his body seething. They were close to bursting. How strong was the body of a Heavenly Venerate? It was tempered with the fundamental powers of the Genesis world, and was many times stronger than divine metal. Each ascension brought it closer in strength to the level of a Heavenly Venerate tool. But now he was being beaten into submission by Ling Han. He was frustrated, enraged, and indignant. However, there was nothing he could do to turn this unfavorable, losing situation around. His chances of survival were slim. A cold glint flashed in Ling Han's eyes. Pum! He struck out with his fist straight into the highest North Heavenly Venerate's temple, directly blowing this Heavenly Venerate's mind to bits. So what if he was a Heavenly Venerate? Unless he managed to release his spirit ahead of time, a complete destruction of his mind would result in absolute death. The highest North Heavenly Venerate had died. At that moment, the purple flames Heavenly Venerate and the rest stopped in their tracks. The highest North Heavenly Venerate was famous as them, and their strength was more or less the same. They had fought, both on the same side and on opposing ends for many epochs. But now the highest North Heavenly Venerate had been killed right before their eyes. They didn't even have the chance to save him. This gave them chills down their spine, and they felt a sense of nervousness from the depths of their soul. Would they also meet a similar end? However, no Heavenly Venerate was that fragile. The 4 of them immediately rekindled their fighting spirit and charged at Ling Han. Ling Han did not shy away from the challenge, and met the 4 of them head-on. Is this brat courting death? The purple flames, Heavenly Venerate, and the rest didn't understand, but they did not care either. All they wanted was Ling Han's death. Kill, kill, kill. Just as their attacks were about to land, Ling Han revealed a mysterious smile. With a wave of his right hand, he threw out the thing hanging on his back. As the stone sheath unwrapped itself, a broken saber was revealed. Whom! Immediately, a terrifying, murderous aura surged forth. What? Not good. The purple flames, Heavenly Venerate, and the rest were shocked. As they were assaulted by this wave of murderous aura, their battle prowess instantly fell. They had to focus a lot of their effort to resist it. Otherwise, they might not even be able to stand firm. Ling Han chuckled and then launched his attack. Naturally, he was already mentally prepared before he threw out this broken saber. Furthermore, his body harbored millions and millions of powers of dimension, making him incredibly resistant to oppressive auras. He had discovered this fact back when he opened the stone, but he had intentionally put on a ruse to hide his true abilities. He hadn't been thinking too hard about it back then. He simply hadn't wanted to reveal his strength. Little had he known, it had resulted in him successfully trapping the 4 great Heavenly Venerates. Pum! He crushed the 6 heavens Heavenly Venerate skull with a single punch. Then, as he turned around, he smashed the purple flames Heavenly Venerate's skull in with his knee, utterly destroying the latter's mind in the process. He wasn't done yet. He retracted his hand and leg, and then struck out again with both simultaneously. Pum! Pum! Both the 4 sides Heavenly Venerates and gray space Heavenly Venerate's skull were smashed. Ling Han wasn't intentionally trying to make things so bloody, but he didn't have a choice. A Heavenly Venerate could only be killed by destroying their mind. Shwa! He wrapped the broken saber back in the layers of stone. Even though he had a strong resistance to the murderous aura emitted by this broken saber, he still felt some of its effects. It was just that he could withstand it better than a normal 4th tier. His movements were very practiced, throwing out the saber, killing, and then cleaning up, all in a single breath. As Ling Han finished, Yu Chunwang was in such shock that he stood up from his chair, his face twitching uncontrollably. Heavenly Venerates were individuals that wouldn't even balk at the destruction of an entire realm. However, the scene before him was simply too shocking. 5 4th tier Heavenly Venerates practically perished in an instant. How could he possibly accept such a thing? How could he possibly remain calm? Ling Han looked at Yu Chunwang silently. Yu Chunwang couldn't stop himself from gulping, as he felt sweat dripping from his forehead. He could sense the pressure of death coming down on him, but under Ling Han's stoic gaze, he didn't dare move a single muscle. Otherwise, he would surely fall on the receiving end of Ling Han's swift attacks and end up the same way as those 5 Heavenly Venerates. Ling Han, my father is a 6th tier Heavenly Venerate. It's not too late for you to cease and desist, he warned Ling Han. He felt great shame to the point of wanting to kill himself as the words left his mouth. He was still a 3rd tier Heavenly Venerate, an all-powerful existence in any medium-level dimension. Even in the Flaming Frost realm, he would stand amongst the strongest of elites. But now he was forced to use his father's name to try and scare someone else just so that he would have a chance to survive. Shameful. It was much too shameful. Ling Han walked towards Yu Chunwang and casually said, "Sure, I don't mind sparing your pitiful life." Yu Chunwang felt a sense of relief, despite being utterly displeased with how Ling Han had called him pitiful. However, before he even had a chance to fully process it all, he saw Ling Han's iron fist coming straight for him. Pum! His head was instantly crushed. Chapter 2869. 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. Chapter 2869. 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. 2869 Empty Fort Strategy. Why? Yu Chunwang's remnant soul, which hadn't yet dissipated completely, let out an unwilling voice. Didn't Ling Han promise not to kill him? Just kidding, don't take it seriously. Ling Han said lightly. Yu Chunwang's remnant soul let out a shrill cry. Despite being reluctant, it could only return to heaven and earth. If he wasn't dead already, he would still be infuriated to death by Ling Han. Ling Han stood upright in midair and glanced around. Here, the The sky was filled with yellow sand, and the heaven and earth were so unique that even the eyesight of the heavenly venerate couldn't reach very far. After scanning around, he said, "Listen, demons and monsters, I will stay here for 10 days. If anyone wants to make a move, I will definitely oblige you for a battle." After speaking, he just sat down cross-legged. This was so domineering. In the distance, the figures of heavenly venerates loomed. Yu Qingwang and the others were interested in the treasures belonging to Ling Han, so how could other people's hearts actually be at peace? Naturally, that was impossible. Yu Qingwang and the others had merely moved first, while the others were simply waiting and observing. It was inevitable that a huge battle would be set off. However, no one thought that the battle between Ling Han and Yu Qingwang would end so quickly. Moreover, it was a complete victory for Ling Han, with him absolutely crushing the other party without sustaining any injury at all. Facing such a terrifying opponent who would dare to step out and be targeted. However, only Ling Han knew that he had had no other option. It was due to the fact that he possessed a special ability. After killing a heavenly venerate, he would absorb the life essence of the other party. Remember, he had killed 6 heavenly venerates in one go just now, with 5 of them having already advanced to the 4th tier. Thus, their life essences gushed into his body all at once, making him feel like he was about to explode. The infinite powers of dimension were like a millstone, crushing these life essences and turning them into energy that Ling Han could absorb, improving his cultivation level at a terrifying speed. Yet, on the other hand, this power was too terrifying, and the rush of power caused him indescribable pain. One had to know that despite him having insta-killed these opponents, there was actually a trick to it. In terms of real battle prowess, the highest North Heavenly Venerate and Purple Flames Heavenly Venerate were not much inferior to Ling Han, and it was merely that the Heavenly Venerable Seals that Ling Han had mastered were much more impressive. Additionally, with the assistance of the Broken Saber, all that allowed him to create a miracle. However, these heavenly venerates exploded, and the life essences gushed into his body. He was actually being filled to the brim, to the point of nearly exploding. The pain was so difficult to bear that he had to use all his power to suppress it. Ling Han forcibly suppressed that feeling of pain. Should he show even the slightest hint of being in pain, perhaps some daring person would make a move against him, and then would immediately be able to confirm his real condition. Although Ling Han would still have the help of the Empress and Hunyao, the strength of the 2 women was only at the 3rd tier, and fighting against a 4th tier would surely be a disastrous situation for them. Therefore, Ling Han had no choice but to take a risk, and sat down domineeringly just like that. On the contrary, it made people unable to ascertain his depth and real condition. Inside his body, his cultivation level was skyrocketing. As expected of a 4th tier, the power was extremely powerful indeed, so much that the energy being transformed was overwhelmingly abundant. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, time passed continuously, and soon the 10 days' time was up. Ling Han didn't stand up. He realized that he had still underestimated the energy of the 6 heavenly venerates, especially the 5 4th tier heavenly venerates. He wasn't able to fully absorb the energy in 10 days, so he still couldn't stand up. He continued to sit and refine the energy, but this made other heavenly venerates develop other ideas. The 10-day period is up. Why hasn't he left yet? Did he think that wasn't enough display of his might and still intend to continue intimidating us? What an arrogant guy. But is there a possibility that something is wrong with him? It isn't an impossibility. It would be absolutely impossible to kill 5 elites of comparable strength in one go without paying a little price. Hiss, then this guy was deliberately being intimidating before, but he was actually in the process of healing. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. If this had been true, then they might have missed a great opportunity. Perhaps, right now he still hasn't recovered yet. Hee, why don't you go up and test it out? Many people were speculating that Ling Han still might not have recovered his battle prowess, but who would dare to give it a try? Hadn't they seen the fate of the purple flames, heavenly venerate, and the others? If, by any chance, Ling Han was deliberately setting a trap and trying to lure out those who wanted to kill him, then wouldn't that be walking right into his trap? Thus, many people were getting restless, but stayed still. The more people there were, the more their hearts wouldn't be united. Perhaps if there was only one person, he would grit his teeth and get on with it. Yet right now, you were looking at me and I was looking at you. No one wanted to pave the way for others, so the opportunity was wasted just like that. Just like this, another 7 days passed by in a flash. Ling Han's body moved, and he stood up. He had finally refined all the life essences of the heavenly venerates. Not only had he regained his battle prowess, but his battle prowess had also further increased by another notch due to the fact that his cultivation level had advanced to the late stage of the 2nd tier. All of you, Ling Han swept a gaze around and shook his head, have missed a great opportunity. I did lose my battle prowess previously, and should anyone have made a move, I'd have been unable to stop it. Well, for the sake of you being so obedient, I will spare you this once. He laughed and walked away. This was too arrogant. Everyone was furious. It turned out that they had really fallen into Ling Han's empty fort strategy. But since he had succeeded, then fine. Why did he still need to say it out loud and mock others? Damn, it was too detestable of him. Yet they hadn't dared to make a move before, let alone now. Who else with cultivation level below 5th tier could take down Ling Han? Unless it was the strongest prodigies, such as Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu. Xian Chihu will definitely not spare Ling Han. That's right, he killed Xian Chihu's servant. Although he was merely a celestial king, who is Xian Chihu? He's someone who would never accept such humiliation. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Everyone comforted themselves in this way. Ling Han was doomed to die anyway, so why should they take action? Ling Han returned to the base. Upon returning, he handed the broken saber to Zhou Heng, while Lin Xiaoyang and Chu Hao both went to find new veins of ore. Zhou Heng immediately said that this was definitely not the precious tool of a 6th tier, but rather belonged to a 7th tier, as he himself couldn't forge this kind of precious tool. Astonishingly, 2 7th tier items had appeared here. However, the 7th tier was immortal, and now the corpse of a 7th tier and a broken weapon of a 7th tier were found. Ultimately, whose hands had caused this? Zhou Heng thought for a while before saying, theoretically speaking, a 7th tier can die. However, it's not like being killed by someone, but rather that he can collapse his mind himself. Even if the physical body is immortal, what remains will just be a dead soul. Ling Han nodded. A 7th tier couldn't be killed because the body was too strong and there wasn't any kind of power that could penetrate it, so it was naturally indestructible. But suicide would be an entirely different matter. But does a 7th tier have a reason to commit suicide? This was the critical point. Which 7th tier would commit suicide? Could one have cultivated himself into an idiot? Ling Han looked at Zhou Heng, while Zhou Heng also looked at him. They couldn't figure out why a 7th tier would commit suicide. This dimension is much more complicated than we have imagined, and, quite possibly, hiding some world-shaking secret, Zhou Heng said. Indeed, only this dimension had heavenly venerable stone, and could also produce great herbs that could be used by even heavenly venerates and even heavenly venerable seals. It should be known that heavenly venerates were hated by the heaven and earth. So how could the heaven and earth produce heavenly venerable seals to help the heavenly venerates? Not much consideration had been given to this matter before, because it was a wonderful thing, but when the 7th tier corpse was found, everything became weird.